Hello, and welcome back to Iscast. Once again, I just want to be like, yes, I am. This is a parody of Creepcast, or the intro is, I guess, but it's a parody in like I'm reading this book. I'm reading things. And my intro sounds like the "Welcome back to Creepcast" thing, because that. Last we left off, we had read chapters 1 through 7, and we got, according to my iBooks, 20% of the way through the first book in the Raven Cycle series by Maggie Stiefvater, The Raven Boys. And now we're on to chapter 8. Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know. I don't really have any more preamble to do other than yap, yap, yap. Oh, yeah, this is for my friend, technically. But I also thought it'd be funny to put it on YouTube. So, if you're watching this and you're not my friend, you're my friend now. Wait, no, that sounds too parasocial. I hope you enjoy listening to me read this like a little bitch, okay? I hope you enjoy me being like Maggie Stiefvater, I'm at your whims, okay? I do read this like I want to make this the best I want to be able to portray this the best that I possibly can. So, because this is the first time that my friend is consuming this media. Well, technically we got partway through the first book, but this is the first time that she's this is the first time she's consuming this media, and I really, really like this book series. And the yearning vibes are simply because I love this book series so much. Okay, chapter 8. By the time Blue made her slow way outside, weariness had extinguished her anxiety. She sucked in a huge breath of cool night air. It didn't even seem like it could be the same substance that filtered through Nino's air conditioning vents. She tilted her head back to look at the stars. Here, on the edge of downtown, there weren't enough streetlights to obliterate the stars completely. Ursa Major, Leo, Cepheus. Is that Cepheus or Cepheus? Bro, I don't know. Her breaths came easier and slower with each familiar constellation she found. The chain was cold as Blue unlocked her bike. Across the parking lot, muffled conversations faded in and out. Footsteps scuffed across the asphalt somewhere close behind her. Even when they were quiet, people really were the noisiest animals. One day, she would live someplace where she could stand outside her house and see only stars, no streetlights, where she could feel as close as she ever got to sharing her mother's gift. When she looked at the stars, something tugged at her, something that urged her to see more than stars, to make sense of the chaotic firmament, to pull an image from it. But it never made sense. She only ever saw Leo and Cepheus, Scorpio and Draco. Maybe she just needed more horizon and less city. The only thing was, she didn't really want to see the future. What she wanted was to see something no one else could see or would see, and maybe that was asking for more magic than was in the world. Excuse me, miss. Miss. Hi. The voice was Excuse me, miss. Miss. Hi. The voice was careful, masculine, and local. The vowels all had the edges sanded off. Blue turned with a lukewarm expression. To her surprise, it was Elegant Boy, face gaunter and older in the distant streetlight. He was alone. No sign of present cell phone, the smudgy one, or their hostile friend. One hand steadied his bike, the other was tucked neatly into his pocket. His uncertain posture didn't quite track with the raven-breasted sweater, and she caught a glimpse of a worn bit of seam on the shoulder before he shrugged it under his ear as if he was cold. Hi, Blue said, softer than she would have if she hadn't noticed the fray. She didn't know what sort of Aggling B-boy wore hand-me-down sweaters. Adam, is it? He gave a jerky, abashed nod. Blue looked at his bike. She didn't know what sort of Aggling B-boy rode a bicycle instead of driving either. I was on my way home, Adam said, and I thought I recognized you over here. I want to say sorry about what happened earlier. I didn't tell him to do that, and I wanted you to know. It didn't escape Blue that his slightly accented voice was as nice as his looks. It was all Henrietta Sunset, hot front porch swings and cold iced tea glasses, cicadas, louder than your thoughts. He glanced over his shoulder, then at the sound of a car on a side street. When he looked back to her, he still wore a wary expression, and Blue saw that this expression, a wrinkle pinched between his eyebrows, mouth tense, was his normal one. It fit his features perfectly, matched up with every line around his mouth and eyes. This Aglionby boy isn't often happy, she thought. Well, that's nice of you, she said, but it's not you that needed to apologize. Adam said, I can't let him take all the blame. I mean, he was right. I did want to talk to you, but I didn't want to just try to pick you up. This is where she ought to brush him off. But she was stymied by his blush at the table, his honest expression, his newly minted, uncertain smile. His face was just strange enough that she wanted to keep looking at it. The fact was that she'd never been flirted with by someone who she wanted to succeed. Don't do it, warned the voice inside Blue. But she asked, and what is it you wanted to do? Talk, he said. In his local accent, it was a long word, and it seemed less of a synonym for speak than it was for confess. She couldn't help but look at the thin, pleasant line of his mouth. He added, I guess I could have just saved a lot of trouble by coming up to talk to you in the first place. Other people's ideas always seem to get me into more trouble. Blue was about to tell him how Orla's ideas got everyone into trouble at her house, too, but then she realized he would say something else, and then she would reply, and it could go on all night. Something about Adam told her that this was a boy she could have a conversation with. Out of nowhere, Mora's voice was in Blue's head. I don't have to tell you not to kiss anyone, right? And just like that, Blue was done. She was, as Neve pointed out, a sensible girl. Even the very best outcome here could only end in torment. She blew out a breath. It wasn't about what he was saying about you. Anyway, it was that he offered me money, she said, putting her foot on the bike pedal. The thing was not to imagine what it would have been like to stay and talk. When Blue didn't have enough money for something, the worst thing in the world was to imagine what it would have been like to have whatever the something was. Adam sighed, as if he recognized her retreat. He doesn't know. He's stupid about money. And you aren't? He just leveled her with a very steady look. It wasn't an expression that left room for folly. Blue tipped her head back, staring up at the stars. It was strange to imagine how quickly they wheeled across the sky, a vast movement too far away for her to detect. Leo Minor, Orion's belt. If she had been her mother or her aunts or her cousin, scrying up through the heavens, would she see what she ought to say to Adam? She asked, Are you coming back to Nino's? Am I invited? She smiled in reply. It sounded like a very dangerous thing. It felt like a very dangerous thing, that smile, like something Mora wouldn't be pleased with. Blue had 2 rules. Stay away from boys, because they're trouble, and stay away from Raven boys, because they were bastards. But those rules didn't seem to apply to Adam. Fumbling in her pocket, she pulled out a tissue and wrote her name and the phone number for 300 Foxway on it. Heart thumping, she folded it up and handed it to him. Adam said only, I'm glad I came back. Turning his long self around, he began to push his dolefully squeaking bike back the way he'd come. Blue pressed her fingers to her face. I gave a boy my number. I gave a Raven boy my number. Hugging her arms around herself, she imagined a future argument with her mother. Giving someone your number doesn't mean you're going to kiss him. Blue jumped when the rear door of the restaurant cracked open. But it was only Donnie, his expression clearing when he saw her. In his hand was a tantalizingly fat, leather-bound book that Blue knew instantly. She'd seen it in President Cellphone's hands. Donnie asked, Do you know who left this behind? Is it yours? I don't remember what voice I did for him before. I think it might. Do you know who left this behind? Is it yours? But I think that if he's probably a local, so he probably sound very Henrietta, so very southern. Do you know who left this behind? Is it yours? Meeting him halfway across the lot, Blue accepted the journal and flipped it open. The journal didn't immediately choose a page to open to. It was so well worn and well stuffed that every page claimed seniority. It finally split down the middle, obeying gravity instead of use. The page it opened to was a mishmash of yellowed clippings from books and newspapers. Red pen underlined a few phrases, added commentary in the margins. Luray Caverns count as spiritual place? Crows equal ravens? And jotted a neatly boxed list titled Welsh-influenced place names near Henrietta. Blue recognized most of the towns listed. Welsh Hills, Glenbower, Harlech, Mackinac. I didn't really read it, Donnie said. I just wanted to see if there was a name in there to return it. Then I saw it was, well, it's your stuff. By this, he meant it was what he expected of a psychic's daughter. I think I know who it belongs to, Blue said. She had no immediate thought other than wanting to spend more time flipping through its pages. I'll take it. After Donnie had returned inside the restaurant, she flipped the journal back open. Now she had time to marvel at the sheer density of it. Even if the content hadn't immediately caught her, the feel of the thing would have. There were so many of the clippings she'd noticed before that the journal wouldn't stay book-shaped unless tied shut with leather wrappings. Pages and pages were devoted to these ripped and scissored excerpts, and there was an undeniable tactile pleasure to browsing. Blue ran her fingers over the varied surfaces. Creamy, thick artist paper with a slender, elegant font. Thin, browning paper with a spidery serif. Slick, utilitarian white stock with an artless modern type. Ragged-edged newspaper in a brittle shade of yellow. Then there were the notes, made with a half-dozen different pens and markers, but all in the same business-like hand. They circled and pointed and underlined very urgently. They made bulleted lists and eager exclamation points in the margins. They contradicted one another and referred to one another in third person. Lines became cross-hatching, became doodles of mountains, became squirrely tire tracks behind fast-looking cars. It took her a while to make sense of what the journal was really about. It was organized into rough sections, but it was clear that whoever had created it had run out of space in some and begun anew later in the journal. There was a section on ley lines, invisible energy lines that connected spiritual places. There was a section on Owain Glendur, the Raven King. There was a section about legends of sleeping knights who waited beneath mountains for discovery and new life. There was a section of very strange stories about sacrificed kings and ancient water goddesses and all of the old things that ravens represented. More than anything, the journal wanted. It wanted more than it could hold, more than words could describe, more than diagrams could illustrate. Longing burst from the pages, in every frantic line, in every hectic sketch, in every dark printed definition. There was something pained and melancholy about it. A familiar shape stood out from the rest of the doodles. 3 intersecting lines, a long beaked triangle. It was the same shape Neve had drawn in the churchyard dust, the same shape her mother had drawn on the steamed shower door. Blue flattened the page to get a better look. This section was on ley lines, mystical energy roads that connect spiritual places. Throughout the journal, the writer had doodled the 3 lines again and again, along with a sickly-looking Stonehenge, strangely elongated horses, and a labeled sketch of a burial mound. There was no explanation of the symbol. It couldn't be a coincidence. There was no way this journal could possibly belong to that presidential raven boy. Someone must have given it to him. Maybe, she thought, it's Adam's. He gave her the same sensation as the journal did, the sense of magic, of possibility, of anxious danger, that same feeling as when Neve had said that a spirit touched her hair. Blue thought, I wish you had been Gansey. But as soon as she thought it, she knew it wasn't true, because whoever Gansey was, he didn't have long to live. Chapter 9. Well, we're going to pause really quick. Erasing all of the things that I know about this book and that will inevitably happen, I do want to say I think it's a good chapter. Okay, I think I like the description of the journal. It makes you feel immense things about a thing that gives such foreshadowing, plays such roles, and it's just a good. It's good. I like it a lot. It's good. I really like. I just keep on being like, it's good. Please agree with me. It's good. Yeah, I really like the description of the book. I like the way that they describe places and stuff. That Maggie Stiefvater's narration describes, like, the way that she described Monmouth was really good. The way that she describes, like, this. Also, later on, she does a lot of great stuff with, like, drawing symbolism and metaphors between, like, certain. I can't talk about it, but I'll talk about it when it comes up. I'll bring it up when it comes up. I'll be like, now this is what I'm talking about when she's really good at drawing lines between things and relationships and so on and so forth. Relationships between people, between a person and writing, a person and a place, between a setting and the people in it. Just like, she does a really good job of doing that. Okay, Chapter 9. Gansey woke in the night to find the moon full on his face and his phone ringing. He fumbled for where it was nestled in the blankets beside him. Blind without his glasses or contacts, he had to hold the screen an inch from his eyes to read the caller ID, Mallory R. Now, Gansey understood the bizarre timing of the call. Dr. Roger Mallory lived in Sussex, a 5-hour time difference from Henrietta. Midnight in Virginia was 5 in the morning for Mallory, the early riser. Mallory was one of the prime authorities on British ley lines. He was either 80 or 100 or 200 years old and had written 3 books on the subjects, all classics in the very limited field. They'd met the summer Gansey was splitting his time between Wales and London. Mallory had been the first one to take 15-year-old Gansey seriously, a favor for which Gansey would not soon stop being grateful for. "Gansey," Mallory said warmly, knowing better than to call him by his Christian name, which we all know is Dick. I'm pretty sure that's been ruled for. I don't remember. Let's pretend I'm not spoiling anything. Because, yep. Without further preamble, Mallory launched in... Okay, yes, it was in the Monmouth. Ashley, Declan, I forgot. Okay, yes. We all know. We are all aware that his legal first name is Richard Dick Campbell Gansey the Third. Maybe not Campbell, but it's fine. It's not, like, a big deal. Yeah, that's his middle name. Like the soup. I really shouldn't, insult this poor guy. Okay. Without further preamble, Mallory launched into a one-sided conversation about the weather, the Historical Society's past 4 meetings, and how frustrating his neighbor with the collie was. Gansey understood about 3/4 of the monologue. After living in the UK for nearly a year, Gansey was good with accents, but Mallory's was often difficult, due to a combination of slurring, chewing, extreme age, bad breeding, and a poor phone connection. Getting out of bed to crouch beside his model of Henrietta, Gansey half listened for a polite 12 minutes before breaking in, gently. "It's nice of you to call." "I found a very interesting textual source," Mallory said. There was a sound like he was either chewing or wrapping something in cellophane. Gansey had seen his flat, and it was quite possible he was doing both. "Who suggested that ley lines are dormant, sleeping, sound familiar? Like Glendower. So what does that mean?" "Might explain why they're so hard to douse. If they're still present but not active, the energy would be very faint and irregular. In Surrey, I was following a line with this fellow. 14 miles, rotten weather, raindrops like turnips, and then it just disappeared." Retrieving a tube of glue and some cardboard shingles, Gansey used the strong moonlight to work on a roof while Mallory went on about rain. He asked, "Did your source say anything about waking the ley lines up? If Glendower can be woken, the ley line could be too, right?" "That's the thought. But all it takes to wake Glendower's discovery. People have been walking all over the ley lines." "Oh, no, Mr. Gansey. That's where you're mistaken. The spirit roads are underground. Even if they weren't always, they're now covered by meters of dirt accumulated over the centuries," Mallory said. "No one's really touched them for hundreds of years. You and I, we don't walk the lines. We just follow the echoes." Gansey recalled how the trail had seemed to come and go for no reason, while he and Adam dowsed the lines. Mallory's theory had a ring of plausibility, and really, that was all he needed. He wanted nothing more than to start scouring his books for further support for this new idea. School day be damned. He felt a rare stab of resentment at being a teen, being tied to Aglionby. Maybe this was how Ronan felt all the time. "Okay, so we go to them underground. Caves, maybe?" "Caves are dreadful things," Mallory replied. "Do you know how many people die in caves every year?" Gansey replied that he was sure he didn't. "Thousands," Mallory assured him. "They are like elephant graveyards. Much better to stay above ground. Spelunking is more dangerous than motorcycle racing. No, this source was all about a ritual way to wake the spirit roads from the surface, letting the ley line know of your presence. You do a symbolic laying of hands on the energy there in Henrietta. Texas?" Whenever Gansey talked to British people about America, they always seemed to think he meant Texas. He said, "Virginia." "Right," agreed Mallory warmly. "Think how easy it would be to follow that spirit road to Glendower if it's shouting loud instead of whispering. You find it, perform the ritual, follow it to your king." When Mallory said it, it sounded inevitable. Follow it to your king. Gansey closed his eyes to calm his pulse. He saw a dimly gray image of a king in repose. Hands folded on his chest, a sword by his right side, a cup by his left. The slumbering figure was dizzyingly important to Gansey in a way that he couldn't begin to understand or shape. It was something more, something bigger, something that mattered. Something without a price tag, something earned. It's giving something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. Marriage. Ugh. Sorry. Me thinking about the institutions. Now that Sorry. Now, the text was not quite clear on how to perform the ritual, Mallory admitted. He rambled about the vagaries of historical documents, and Gansey only paid a little attention until he finished with, I'm going to try it on the Lockyer Road. I'll let you know how it goes. Brilliant, Gansey said. I can't say thanks enough. I'll give my regards to your mother. Give my regards to your mother. You're lucky you still have your mother at your age. When I was about your age, my mother was murdered by the British healthcare system. She was perfectly fine until she was admitted after a little cough. Gansey half listened to Mallory's oft-repeated story of the government's failure to cure his mother's throat cancer. Mallory sounded quite cheerful by the time the phone had gone silent. Now Gansey felt infected by the chase. He needed to talk to someone before the unfinished feeling of the quest ate him from the inside out. Adam would be the best, but the odds were good that Ronan, who swung wildly between insomnia and hypersomnia, would be awake. He'd only made it halfway to Ronan's room before the thought struck him that it was empty. Standing in the dark doorway, Gansey whispered Ronan's name, and then, when that got no response, spoke it aloud. Ronan's room was not to be approached, but Gansey did it anyway. Putting his hand on the bed, he found it unmade and cool, the blankets thrown aside with the speed of Ronan's going. Gansey hammered Noah's closed door with a fist while fumbling to dial Ronan's number with his other hand. It rang twice before Ronan's voicemail said merely, Ronan Lynch. Gansey cut off the recorded voice mid-word, his pulse tripping. For a moment he debated. Then he dialed another number. This time it was Adam's voice that answered, low with sleep and caution. Gansey? Ronan's gone. Adam was quiet. It was not just that Ronan had vanished. It was that he had vanished after a fight with Declan. But it wasn't an easy thing to leave the parish household in the middle of the night. The consequences of getting caught could leave physical evidence, and it was getting too warm for long sleeves. Gansey felt wretched for asking this of him. Outside, a midnight bird cried, high and piercing. The little replica of Henrietta was eerie in the half-light, the die-cast cars parked on the streets, appearing as though they had just paused. Gansey always thought that, after dark, it felt like anything could happen. At night, Henrietta felt like magic, and at night, magic felt like it might be a terrible thing. I'll check the park, Adam whispered finally. And, the bridge, I guess. Adam hung up so softly that it took Gansey a moment to realize the connection had ended. He pressed his fingertips to his eyes, which was how Noah found him. You're going to look for him? Noah asked. He looked pale and insubstantial in the yellow late-night light of the room behind him. The skin beneath his eyes was darker than anything. He looked less like Noah than the suggestion of Noah. Check the church. Noah didn't say he would go along, and Gansey didn't ask him to. 6 months ago, the only time it had ever mattered, Noah had found Ronan in an introspective pool of his own blood, and so he was exempt from ever having to look again. Noah hadn't gone with Gansey to the hospital afterward, and Adam had been caught trying to sneak out, so it was only Gansey who had been with Ronan when they stitched his skin hole again. It had been a long time ago, but also it was no time at all. Sometimes Gansey felt like his life was made up of a dozen hours that he could never forget. Pulling on his jacket, he headed out into the greenish light of the chilly parking lot. The hood of Ronan's BMW was cold, so it hadn't been driven recently. Wherever he'd gone on foot. The church, its spire, illuminated by dusky yellow light, was within walking distance. So was Nino's. So was the old bridge with the fast current rushing away beneath it. He started to walk. His mind was logical, but his traitorous heart stuttered from beat to beat. He wasn't naive. He carried no illusions that he'd ever recover the Ronan Lynch he'd known before Niall died. But he didn't want to lose the Ronan Lynch he had now. Despite the strong moonlight, the entrance to St. Agnes lay in total darkness. Shivering a bit, Gansey put his hand on the great iron ring that pulled open the church door, unsure if it would be locked. He'd only been to St. Agnes once, on Easter, because Ronan's younger brother Matthew had asked them all to come. He wouldn't have thought of it as a place someone like Ronan would go in the middle of the night. But then again, he wouldn't have pegged Ronan as a churchgoer at all. And yet, all of the Lynch brothers went to St. Agnes every Sunday. For an hour, they managed to sit next to one another in a pew, even when they couldn't meet one another's eyes over a restaurant table. Stepping through the black arch of an entrance, Gansey thought, Noah is good at finding things. He hoped that Noah was right about Ronan. The church enveloped Gansey in an incense-scented pocket of air, a rare enough smell that it instantly evoked 6 memories of family weddings, funerals, and baptisms, every one of them summer. How strange that a season should be held captive in one breath of trapped air. Ronan. The word was sucked into the empty space. It echoed off the unseeable ceiling far overhead, so it was only his voice, in the end, that answered him. The subdued aisle light made peaked shadows of arches. The darkness and uncertainty crushed Gansey's ribs as small as a fist, his breathless lungs reminding him of yet another long-ago summer day. That afternoon he first realized there was such a thing as magic in the world. And there Ronan was, stretched out on one of the shadowed pews, an arm hanging off the edge, the other skewed above his head, his body a darker bit of black in an already black world. He wasn't moving. Gansey thought, not tonight. Please, don't let it be tonight. Edging into the pew behind Ronan, he put his hand on the other boy's shoulder, as if he could merely wake him, praying that by assuming it so it would be true. The shoulder was warm below his hand. He smelled alcohol. Wake up, dude, he said. The words didn't sound light, though he meant them to. Ronan's shoulder shifted, and his face turned. For a brief, unchanged moment, Gansey had a sudden thought that he was too late, and Ronan was dead after all, that his corpse woke now only because Gansey had commanded it to. But then Ronan's brilliant blue eyes opened, and the moment dissipated. Gansey let out a sigh. You bastard, Ronan said plainly. I couldn't dream. Then, taking in Gansey's stricken expression, he added, I promised you it wouldn't happen again. Gansey tried again to keep his voice light, but failed. But you're a liar. I think, Ronan replied, that you're mistaking me for my brother. The church was quiet and full around them. It seemed brighter now that Ronan's eyes were open, as if the building had been asleep as well. When I told you I didn't want you getting drunk at Monmouth, I didn't mean I wanted you drunk somewhere else. Ronan, with only a little slurring, replied, Pot calling the kettle black. With dignity, Gansey said, I drink. I do not get drunk. Ronan's eyes dropped to something he held near his chest. What is that? Gansey asked. Next to his chest, Ronan's fingers curled around a dark object. When Gansey went out to uncurl his grip, he felt something warm and living, a rapid pulse against his fingertips. He snatched his hand away. Christ, said Gansey, trying to make sense of what he'd felt. Is that a bird? Ronan slowly sat up, still holding his cargo close. Another woof of alcohol-laced breath drifted toward Gansey. Raven. There was a long pause as Ronan regarded his hand. Maybe a crow, but I doubt it. Yeah, I seriously doubt it. Corvus corax. Even drunk, Ronan knew the Latin name for the common raven. And it was not just a raven, Gansey saw. It was a tiny foundling. Featherless mouth, still a baby's smile, wings still days and nights and days away from flight. He wasn't sure he would want to touch something that looked so easily destroyable. The raven was Glendower's bird. The Raven King, he was called, from a long line of kings associated with the bird. Legend had it that Glendower could speak to ravens, and vice versa. It was only one of the reasons why Gansey was here in Henrietta, a town known for its ravens. His skin prickled. Where did it come from? Ronan's fingers were a compassionate cage around the raven's breast. It didn't look real in his hands. I found it. People find pennies, Gansey replied, or car keys, or four-leaf clovers. And ravens, Ronan said. You're just jealous because, at this point, he had to stop to regroup his beer-sluggish thoughts. You didn't find one, too. The bird had just crapped between Ronan's fingers onto the pew beside him. Holding the fledgling in one hand, Ronan used a church bulletin to scrape the majority of the mess off the wood. He offered the soiled paper to Gansey. The weekly prayer requests were spattered with white. Gansey only took the paper because he didn't trust Ronan to bother finding a place to throw it out. With some distaste, he asked, What if I implement a no pets policy at the apartment? Well, hell, man, Ronan replied with a savage smile. You can't just throw out Noah like that. It took Gansey a moment to realize that Ronan had made a joke, and by then it was too late to laugh. In any case, he knew he was going to let the bird return with them to Monmouth Manufacturing because he saw the possessive way Ronan held it. Already, the raven looked up at him, beak cracked hopefully, dependent. Gansey relented. Come on. We're going back. Get up. Ronan unsteadily climbed to his feet. The raven hunched down in his hands, becoming all beak and body, no neck. He said, Get used to some turbulence, you little bastard. You can't name it that. Her name's Chainsaw, replied Ronan, without looking up. Then, Noah, you're creepy as hell back there. In the deep shadowed entrance of the church, Noah stood silently. For a second, all that seemed to be visible was his pale face, his dark clothing invisible, and his eyes chasms into some place unknowable. Then he stepped into the light, and he was rumpled and familiar as always. "I thought you weren't coming," Gansey said. Noah's gaze traveled past them to the altar, and then up to the dark, unseeable ceiling. He said with typical bravery, "The apartment was creepy." "Freak," Ronan remarked, but Noah seemed unconcerned. Gansey pulled open the door to the sidewalk. No sign of Adam. Guilt for calling him out for a false alarm was beginning to settle in, though he wasn't entirely certain it was a false alarm. Something had happened, even if he wasn't sure what. Where did you say you found that bird again?" "In my head." Ronan's laugh was a sharp jackal cry. "Dangerous place," commented Noah. Ronan stumbled, all his edges blunted by alcohol, and the raven in his hands let out a feeble sound more percussive than vocal. He replied, "Not for a chainsaw." Back out in the hard spring night, Gansey tipped his head back. Now that he knew Ronan was all right, he could see that Henrietta, after dark, was a beautiful place. A patchwork town embroidered with black tree branches. A raven of all the birds for Ronan to turn up with. Gansey didn't believe in coincidences. Chapter 10. "That's so good. It's so good." "Look me in the eyes and tell me it's not good." I don't know. I feel a little weird doing commentary after every single chapter, even though I was trying to do that last chapter. I don't know. Welcome Chainsaw to the family, I guess. I love Chainsaw. We all love Chainsaw here. If you don't love Chainsaw here, I don't know what to tell you. 'Cause you're supposed to. It's like you signed in your contract when you got here. I've been with my hands, because I don't know why, but I don't know what to do with my hands. So sometimes when I don't know what to do with my hands, I just start brushing through my hair. And because my hair's curly, I'm basically brushing the curls out of it and making it go really frizzy. It's fine, because I'll shower tomorrow morning, and it's night, and I'm going to go to bed and then shower tomorrow morning. So it's really not impacting, like, how I look, because no one will see me. But I just realized that that's what I just did. And I really should find something else to do with my hands while I read, because I've just fully brushed out my hair with my fingers, and it's a mess, like big poofy mess. So that was a choice I just made. Oh boy. Chapter 10. Welk was not sleeping. Back when he was an Aglanby boy, sleep had come easy. And why shouldn't it have? Like Churney and the rest of his classmates, he slept 2 or 4 or 6 hours on weekdays, up late, up early, and then performed marathon sleeping sessions on the weekend. And when he did sleep, it was hours of easy, dreamless sleep. No, he knew that was false. Everyone dreamed, only some forgot. Now, however, he rarely closed his eyes for longer than a few hours at a stretch. He rolled in his bed sheets. He sat bolt upright, woken by whispers. He nodded off on his leather couch, the only piece of furniture the government hadn't seized. His sleep patterns and energy seemed dictated by something larger and more powerful than himself, ebbing and flowing like an uneven tide. Attempts to chart it left him frustrated. He seemed more wakeful at the full moon and after thunderstorms, but beyond that it was difficult to predict. In his mind, he imagined that it was the magnetic pulse of the ley line itself, somehow invited into his body through Churney's death. Sleep deprivation made his life an imaginary thing, his days a ribbon floating aimlessly in the water. It was nearly a full moon, and it had not been long since it rained, so Welk was awake. He sat in a t-shirt and boxers in front of the computer screen, operating the mouse with the unprincipled and dubious productivity of the fatigued. All in a rush, the countless voices invaded his head, whispering and hissing. They sounded like static, like the static that buzzed over phone lines in the vicinity of the ley line, like the wind before a storm front, like the trees themselves conspiring. As always, Will couldn't pick out any words, and he couldn't understand the conversation, but he did understand one thing. Something strange had just happened in Henrietta, and the voices couldn't stop talking about it. For the first time in years, Welk retrieved his old country maps from his tiny hall closet. He had no table, and the countertop was cluttered with open packages of microwave lasagna and plates with stale bread crusts on them, so he spread the maps out in the bathroom instead. A spider in the bathtub skidded out of his way when he flattened a map against the surface. Churney, you're in a better place than me, I think. But he didn't really believe that. He had no idea what had become of Churney's soul or spirit or whatever you wanted to call what had been Churney. But if Welk had been cursed with the whispering voices merely by his part in the ritual, Churney's fate must have been worse. Welk stood back and crossed his arms, studying the dozens of marks and notations he'd made on the maps over the course of his search. Churney's impossible handwriting, always in red, noted energy levels along the possible path of the ley line. Back then, it had been a game, a treasure hunt, a play for glory. Was it true? It didn't matter. It was an expensive exercise in strategy with the East Coast as the playing field. Looking for patterns, Welk had painstakingly drawn circles around areas of interest on one of the topographical maps. A circle around an old copse of ash trees where the energy levels were always high. A circle around a ruined church that wildlife seemed to avoid. A circle around the place Churney had died. Of course, he had drawn the circle before Churney had died. The place, a sinister group of oak trees, had been notable because of old words carved into one of the trunks. Latin. It seemed incomplete, difficult to translate, and Welk's best guess was the second road. The energy levels were promising there, though if inconsistent. Surely this, then, was on the ley line. Churney and Welk had returned a half-dozen times, taking readings. Next to the circle, there were 6 different numbers in Churney's handwriting. Digging in the dirt for possible artifacts, watching overnight for signs of supernatural activity. Welk had constructed his most complicated and sensitive dowsing rod yet. 2 metal wires bent at a 90-degree angle and inserted into a metal tube handle so that they could swing freely. They doused the area around it, trying to establish the path of the line. But it remained spotty, coming in and out of focus like a distant radio station. The lines needed to be woken, to have their frequencies honed, the volume turned up. Churney and Welk made plans to attempt the ritual in the oak grove. They weren't quite sure of the process, though. All Welk could find out was that the line loved reciprocity and sacrifice, but that was frustratingly vague. No other information presented itself, so they kept pushing it off, over winter break, spring break, end of the school year. Then Welk's mother had called and told Welk that his father had been arrested for unethical business practices and income tax evasion. It turned out the company had been trading with war criminals, a fact his mother knew and Welk had guessed, and the FBI had been watching for years. Overnight, the Welks lost everything. It was in the papers the next day, the catastrophic crash of the Welk family fortune. Both of Welk's girlfriends left him. Well, the second was technically Churney's, so perhaps that didn't count. The whole thing was all very public. The Virginia playboy, heir to the Welk fortune, suddenly evicted from his Aglenby dorm, relieved of his social life, freed from any hope of his Ivy League future, watching his car being loaded onto a truck and his room emptied of speakers and furniture. The last time Welk had looked at this map had been as he stood in his dorm room, realizing that the only thing he had left was the $10 bill in his pocket. None of his credit cards meant anything anymore. Churney had pulled up in his red Mustang. He hadn't gotten out of the car. "Does this make you white trash now?" he'd asked. Churney didn't really have a sense of humor. He just sometimes said things that happened to be funny. Welk, standing in the wreckage of his life, didn't laugh this time. The ley line wasn't a game anymore. "Unlock your door," Welk had told him. "We're doing the ritual." Chapter 11. Yeah. I can't fucking say anything, because anything I say about this will just be me being like, spoiling. Yeah, anyways, chapter 11. 1 hour and 23 minutes before Blue's alarm was supposed to go off for school, she was awoken by the front door closing. Gray dawn light filtered in her bedroom window, making diffuse shadows of the leaves pressed against the glass. She tried not to resent her lost 1 hour and 23 minutes of sleep. Footsteps started up the staircase. Blue caught the sound of her mother's voice. "Was up waiting for you." "Some things are better done at night." This was Neve. Though her voice was smaller than Mora's, it was crisper somehow and carried well. "Henrietta is quite a place, isn't it?" "I didn't ask you to look at Henrietta," Mora replied in a stage whisper. She sounded protective. "It is difficult not to. It shouts," Neve said. Her next words were lost in the sound of a creaking chair. Mora's reply was obscured as she, too, started to climb the stairs, but it sounded like, "I would prefer if you left Blue out of this." Blue went very still. Neve said, "I'm only telling you what I'm finding. If he vanished at the same time, if he vanished at the same time that and then there's a ... to indicate that she's fading in and out of dialogue. If he vanished at the same time, that possible they're linked. Do you not want her to know who he is? Another stare groaned. Blue thought, why can't they talk without creaking up the stairs at the same time? Mora snapped, I don't see how that would be easier for anyone. Neve murmured a reply. This is already getting out of hand, her mother said. It was barely more than typing his name into a search engine, and now... Blue strained her ears. It felt like she hadn't heard her mother use a masculine pronoun for quite a long time, with the exception of Gansey. It was possible, Blue thought after a long moment, that Mora meant Blue's father. None of the awkward conversations Blue had attempted with her mother had ever gotten her any information about him, just nonsensical, humorous replies. He is Santa Claus. He was a bank robber. He's currently in orbit. That changed every time she asked. In Blue's head, he was a dashing, heroic figure who had to vanish because of a tragic past, possibly to a witness protection program. She liked to imagine him stealing a glimpse of her over the backyard fence, proudly watching his strange daughter daydream under the beech tree. Blue was awfully fond of her father, considering she'd never met him. Somewhere in the depths of the house, a door closed, and then there was once more the sort of night silence that is hard to disturb. After a long moment, Blue reached over to the plastic bin that served as her nightstand and retrieved the journal. She rested a hand on the cool leather cover. The surface of it felt like the cool, smooth bark of the beech tree behind the house. As when she touched the beech tree, she felt at once comforted and anxious, reassured, and driven to action. Henrietta is quite a place, Neve had said. The journal seemed to agree. A place for what? She wasn't sure. Blue didn't mean to fall asleep, but she did, for another hour and 12 minutes. It wasn't her alarm that woke her this time, either. It was a single thought that shouted in her brain. Today is the day Gansey comes for his reading. Embroiled in the daily routine of getting ready for school, the conversation between Mora and Neve seemed more commonplace than it had before, but the journal was still as magical. Sitting on the edge of her bed, Blue touched one of the quotes. The king sleeps still under a mountain, and around him is assembled his warriors and his herds and his riches. By his right hand is his cup, filled with possibility. On his breast nestles his sword, waiting, too, to wake. Fortunate is the soul who finds the king, and is brave enough to call him to wakefulness, for the king will grant him a favor, as wondrous as can be imagined by a mortal man. She closed the pages. It felt as if there were a larger, terribly curious Blue inside her that was about to bust out of the smaller, more sensible Blue that held her. For a moment longer, she let the journal rest on her legs, the cover cool against her palms. A favor. If she had a favor, what would she ask? To not have to worry about money? To know who her father had been? To travel the world? To see what her mother saw? The thought rang around her brain again. Today is the day Gansey comes for his reading. What will he be like? Maybe if she was standing before that sleeping king, she'd ask the king to save Gansey's life. Blue, I hope you're awake, Orla screamed from downstairs. Blue needed to leave soon if she was to make the bike trip to school on time. In a few weeks it would be an uncomfortably hot ride. Possibly she would ask his sleeping king for a car. I wish I could just cut class today. It wasn't that Blue dreaded high school. It just felt like a holding pattern. And it wasn't as if she was bullied. It hadn't taken her very long to discover that the weirder she looked on the outside, the more she let other kids realize she wasn't like them from the very beginning, the less likely she was to be picked on or ignored. The fact was, by the time she got to high school, being weird and proud of it was an asset. Suddenly cool, Blue could have happily had any number of friends, and she had tried, but the problem with being weird was that everyone else was normal. So her family remained her closest friends, school remained a chore, and Blue remained secretly hopeful that, somewhere out there in the world, there were other odd people like her. Even if they didn't seem to be in Henrietta. It was possible, she thought, that Adam was also odd. Blue! Orla bellowed again. School! With the journal held fast to her chest, Blue headed toward the red-painted door at the end of the hall. On her way, she had to pass the frenzy of activity in the phone/sewing/cat room and the furious battle for the bathroom. The room behind the red door belonged to Persephone, one of Mora's two best friends. The door was ajar, but still Blue knocked softly. Persephone was a poor but energetic sleeper. Her midnight shouting and nocturnal leg paddling ensured that she never had to share a room. It also meant that she grabbed sleep when she could. Blue didn't want to wake her. Persephone's tiny, breathy voice said, It's available. Open. Pushing open the door, Blue found Persephone sitting at the card table beside the window. When pressed, people often remembered Persephone's hair, a long, wavy, white blonde mane that fell to the back of her thighs. If they got past her hair, they sometimes recalled her dresses, elaborate, frothy creations or quizzical smocks. If they made it past that, they were unsettled by her eyes, true mirror black, the pupils hidden in the darkness. Currently, Persephone held a pencil with a strangely childlike grip. When she saw Blue, she frowned in a pointy sort of way. "Good morning," Blue said. "Good morning," Persephone echoed. "It's too early. My words aren't working, so I'll just use as many of the ones that work for you as possible." She twirled a hand around in a vague sort of way. Blue took this as a sign to find a place to sit. Most of the bed was covered by strange embroidered leggings and plaid tights running in place, but she found a place to lean her butt on the edge. The whole room smelled familiar, like oranges or baby powder, or maybe like a new textbook. "Sleep badly?" Blue asked. "Badly," Persephone echoed again. Then, "Oh, well, that's not quite true. I'll have to use my own words after all." "What are you working on?" Often, Persephone was working on her eternal PhD thesis, but because it was a process that seemed to require vexed music and frequent snacks, she rarely did it during the morning rush. "Just a little something," Persephone said sadly. Or perhaps thoughtfully. It was hard to tell the difference, and Blue didn't like to ask. Persephone had a lover or husband who was dead or overseas. It was always difficult to know details when it came to Persephone, and she seemed to miss him, or at least notice that he was gone, which was notable for Persephone. Again, Blue didn't like to ask. From Mora, Blue had inherited a dislike of watching people cry, so she never liked to steer the conversation in a way that might result in tears. Real. Persephone tilted her paper up so Blue could see it. She'd just written the word 3 times, in 3 different handwritings, and a few inches beneath it she'd copied a recipe for banana cream pie. "Important things come in threes?" Blue suggested. It was one of Mora's favorite sayings. Persephone underlined tablespoon next to the word vanilla in the recipe. Her voice was far away and vague. "Or sevens. That is a lot of vanilla. One wonders if that is a typo." "One wonders," repeated Blue. "Blue!" Mora shouted up. "Are you gone yet?" Blue didn't reply because Persephone disliked high-pitched sounds, and shouting back seemed to qualify as one. Instead, she said, "I found something. If I show it to you, will you not tell anybody else about it?" This was a silly question. Persephone barely told anyone anything, even when it wasn't a secret. When Blue handed over the journal, Persephone said, "Should I open it?" Blue flapped a hand, yes, and quickly. She fidgeted back and forth on the bed while Persephone paged through, her face betraying nothing. Finally, Blue asked, "Well?" "It's very nice," Persephone said. "It's not Persephone said politely. "It's not mine." "Well, I can see that. It was left behind a neat... Wait, why do you say that?" Persephone paged back and forth. Her dainty child's voice was soft enough that Blue had to hold her breath to hear it. "This is clearly a boy's journal. Also, it's taking him forever to find this thing. You'd have already found it." "Blue!" roared Mora. "I am not shouting again." "What do you think I should do about it?" Blue asked. As Blue had, Persephone ran her fingers over the varying grains of the papers. She realized Persephone was right. If the journal had been hers, she would have just copied down the information she needed rather than all this cutting and pasting. The fragments were intriguing but unnecessary. Whoever put that journal together must love the hunt itself, the process of research. The aesthetic properties of the journal couldn't be accidental. It was an academic piece of art. "Well," Persephone said, "first you might find out whose journal it is." Blue's shoulders sagged. It was a relentlessly proper answer, and one that she might have expected from Mora or Kala. Of course, she knew she had to return it to its rightful owner. But then, where would the fun of it go? Persephone added, "Then I think you'd better find out if it's true, don't you?" I love Persephone. I love Persephone. Do you know how much I love Persephone? I love Persephone. Persephone's so great. I love Persephone so much. She's just... I mean, like, I don't know if she's fresh air or, like, the smell of laundry. I think she's like laundry. Or Febreze. What I imagine Febreze is like. I don't actually know what Febreze is like. So, you know. I think she'd fit it. Probably. I really like Persephone. Okay. Chapter 12. Are you so ready? Oh my god, my microphone is falling. Fuck. Shit. Fuck. Okay, give me a second. Okay, I fixed it. Alright, chapter 12. Adam wasn't waiting by the bank of mailboxes in the morning. The first time that Gansey had come to pick up Adam, he'd driven past the entrance to Adam's neighborhood. Actually, more properly, he'd used it as a place to turn around and head back the way he'd come. The road was two ruts through a field. Even driveway was too lofty a word for it, and it was impossible to believe, at first look, that it led to a single house, much less a collection of them. Once Gansey had found the house, things had gone even more poorly. At the sight of Gansey's Aglionby sweater, Adam's father had charged out, firing on all cylinders. For weeks after that, Ronan had called Gansey the SRF, where the S stood for soft, the R stood for rich, and the F for something else. Oh, I love getting called slurs. Back in middle school corps. Now Adam just met Gansey where the asphalt ended. But there was no one waiting by the clustered herd of mailboxes now. It was just empty space, and a lot of it. This part of the valley was endlessly flat in comparison to the other side of Henrietta, and somehow this field was always several degrees drier and more colorless than the rest of the valley. Like both of the major roads, and the rain avoided it. Even at 8 in the morning, there were no shadows anywhere in the world. Peering down the desiccated drive, Gansey tried the house phone, but it merely rang. His watch said he had 18 minutes to make the 15-minute drive to school. He waited. The engine threw the car to and fro as the pig idled. He watched the gear shift knob rattle. His feet were roasting from proximity to the V8. The entire cabin was beginning to stink of gasoline. He called Monmouth Manufacturing. Noah answered, sounding like he'd been woken. "Noah," Gansey said loudly, to be heard over the engine. Noah had let him leave his journal behind at Nino's after all, and its absence was surprisingly unsettling. "Do you remember Adam saying he had work after school today?" On the days that Adam had work, he often rode his bike in so that he'd have it to get to places later. Noah grunted to the negative. 16 minutes until class. "Call me if he calls," Gansey said. "I won't be here," Noah replied. "I'm almost gone anyway." Gansey hung up and unsuccessfully tried the house again. Adam's mother might be there but not answering, but he didn't really have time to go back into the neighborhood and investigate. He could cut class. Gansey tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. "Come on, Adam." Of all the places Gansey had attended boarding school, and he'd attended many in his 4 years of underage wandering, Aglionby Academy was his father's favorite, which meant it was the most likely to land its student body in the Ivy League, or the Senate. It also meant, however, that it was the most difficult school Gansey had ever been to. Before Henrietta, he'd made his search for Glendower his primary activity, and school had been a distant second. Gansey was clever enough, and he was good at studying, if nothing else, so it hadn't been a problem to skip classes or push homework to the bottom of the list. But at Aglionby, there were no failing grades. If you dropped below a B average, you were out on your ass. And Dick Gansey II had let his son know that if he couldn't hack it in a private school, Gansey was cut out of the will. He'd said it nicely, though, over a plate of fettuccine. Over a plate of fettuccine. Gansey couldn't cut class, not after missing school the day before. That was what it came down to. 14 minutes to make a 15-minute drive to school, and Adam not waiting. He felt the old fear creeping slowly out of his lungs. "Don't panic. You were wrong about Ronan last night. You have to stop this. Death isn't as close as you think." Dispirited, Adam tried the home phone one more time. Nothing. He had to go. Adam must have taken his bike. He must have had work. He must have had errands to run and forgotten to tell him. The rutted drive down to the neighborhood was still empty. "Come on, Adam." Wiping his palms on his slacks, he put his hands back on the steering wheel and headed for the school. Gansey didn't get a chance to see if Adam had made it to Aglionby until third period, when they both had Latin. This was, inexplicably, the only class Ronan had never missed. Ronan was head of class in Latin. He studied joylessly but relentlessly, as if his life depended on it. Directly behind him was Adam, Aglionby's star pupil, otherwise at the top of every class that he took. Like Ronan, Adam studied relentlessly because his future life did depend on it. For his part, Gansey preferred French. He told Helen there was very little purpose to a language that couldn't be used to translate a menu, but really, French was just easier for him to learn. His mother spoke a little. He'd originally resigned himself to taking Latin in order to translate historical texts for Glendower research, but Ronan's proficiency at the language robbed Gansey's study of any urgency. Latin was held in Borden House, a small frame house on the other side of the Aglionby campus from Welch Hall, the main academic building. As Gansey strode hurriedly across the center green, Ronan appeared, knocking Gansey's arm. His eyes looked like he hadn't slept in days. Ronan hissed, "Where's Parrish?" "He didn't come in with me today," Gansey said, mood sinking. Ronan and Adams shared second period. "You haven't seen him yet?" "Wasn't in class." Behind Gansey, someone punched his shoulder blade and said, "Gansey boy!" as they trotted by. Gansey half-heartedly lifted 3 fingers, the signal of the rowing team. I tried calling him at the house, he said. Ronan replied, well, poor boy needs a cell. A few months earlier, Gansey had offered to buy Adam a cell phone, and by so doing had launched the longest fight they had ever had. A week of silence that had resolved itself only when Ronan did something more offensive than either of them could accomplish. Lynch! Gansey looked in the direction of the voice. Ronan didn't. The owner of the voice was halfway across the green, difficult to identify in the homogeneous Aglanby uniform. Lynch! The call came again. I'm gonna fuck you up. Ronan still didn't look up. He adjusted the strap on his shoulder and continued stalking across the grass. What's that about? Gansey demanded. Some people don't take losing very well, Ronan replied. Was that Kavinsky? Don't tell me you've been racing again. Don't ask me that. Gansey contemplated if he could give Ronan a curfew, or if he should quit rowing to spend more time with him on Fridays. He knew that was when Ronan got into trouble with BMW. Maybe he could convince Ronan to... Ronan adjusted the strap on his shoulder again, and this time Gansey took a closer look at it. I'm sorry. I just really like this. Sorry. The bag it belonged to was distinctly larger than as usual, and he handled it gingerly as if it might spill. Gansey asked, why are you carrying it like that? Carrying that bag? Oh my God, you have that bird in there, don't you? She has to be fed every 2 hours. How do you know? Jesus, the internet, Gansey. Ronan pulled open the door to Borden House as soon as they breached the threshold. I'm so sorry. I should be reading this with a, normal voice. Jesus, you have that bird in... Oh my God, you have that bird in there, don't you? She has to be fed every 2 hours. Okay, sorry. Jesus, the internet, Gansey. Ronan pulled open the door to Borden House as soon as they breached the threshold. Everything within sight was covered with navy blue carpet. If you get caught with that thing... But Gansey couldn't think of a suitable threat. What was the punishment for smuggling a live bird into classes? He wasn't certain there was a precedent. He finished, instead, if it dies in your bag, I forbid you to throw it out in a classroom. She, Ronan corrected. It's a she. I'd buy that if it had any defining sexual characteristics. It better not have bird flu or something. But he wasn't thinking about Ronan's raven. He was thinking about Adam not being in class. Ronan and Gansey took their usual seats in the back of the navy-carpeted classroom. At the front of the room, Welk was writing verbs on the board. When Gansey and Ronan had come in, Welk had stopped writing mid-word, interneck. Though there was no reason to think Welk cared about their conversation, Gansey had the strange idea that the lifted piece of chalk in Welk's hand was because of them, that the Latin teacher had stopped writing merely to listen in. Adam's suspicion really was beginning to rub off on him. Ronan caught Welk's eye and held it in an unfriendly sort of way. Despite his interest in Latin, Ronan had declared their Latin teacher a socially awkward shitbird earlier in the year, and further clarified that he didn't like him. Because he despised everyone, Ronan wasn't a good judge of character, but Gansey had to agree that there was something discomfiting about Welk. A few times, Gansey had tried to hold a conversation with him about Roman history, knowing full well the effect an enthusiastic academic conversation could have on an otherwise listless grade. But Welk was too young to be a mentor and too old to be a peer, and Gansey couldn't find an angle. Ronan kept staring at Welk. He was good at staring. There was something about his stare that took something from the other person. The Latin teacher flicked his gaze awkwardly away from them. Having dealt with Welk's curiosity, Ronan asked, "What are you going to do about Parrish?" "I guess I'm going to go by there after class, right?" "He's probably sick." They looked at each other. "We're making excuses for him," Gansey thought. Ronan peered inside his bag again. In the darkness, Gansey just caught a glimpse of the raven's beak. Usually, Gansey would have basked once more in the odds of Ronan finding a raven, but at the moment, with Adam missing, his quest didn't feel like magic. It felt like years spent piecing together coincidences, and all he had made from it was a strange cloth. Too heavy to carry, too light to do any good at all. "Mr. Gansey, Mr. Lynch." Welk had managed to suddenly manifest beside their desks. Both boys looked up at him. Gansey, polite, Ronan, hostile. "You seem to have an extremely large bag today, Mr. Lynch," Welk said. "You know what they say about men with large bags," Ronan replied. "Ostendus tuum et ostendum neus." I can't fucking pronounce. I'm so sorry for my future mispronouncing of French. Latin, not French. Latin. Jesus Christ. Anyways, I Google translated. So fair warning, it's not. It's just like Google Translate. But I Google translated all of the Latin each time I like when I like read this the second time around, and just added it as a note in my iBooks app. So ostendus tuum et ostendum meus means, will you show me yours and I'll show you mine. So you know what they say with men with large bags. You you show me yours and I'll show you mine. I'm sure there's a better phrasing for it that was originally intended. That was like, you show me yours, I'll show you mine. Like funny innuendo. Anyways, Gansey had no idea what Ronan had just said, but he was certain from Ronan's smirk that it wasn't entirely polite. Welk's expression confirmed Gansey's suspicion, but he merely rapped on Ronan's desk with his knuckles and moved off. Being a shit in Latin isn't the way to an A, Gansey said. Ronan's smile was golden. It was last year. At the front of beep, 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 beep. Me when I can fucking talk. At the front of the room, Welk began class. Adam never showed. Chapter 13. Oof. I wanted to give Welk a creepy voice. Yeah. I feel like he needs I come up behind you and all of my words sound a little bit rounded off at the end. Like I'm kind of falling into a hush at the end of it. Like I'm saying, imagine I was trying to, I'm just gonna come up with something like, what's a thing that people say that's really long? So imagine I was saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I think that's the only thing that I have memorized okay. Just imagine I'm saying, I pledge allegiance to the flag. Like the word, the vowel, the consonants falling off at the end. That's how I imagine his voice is kind of like, just like rounded off at the end. Like he's been crushed under the weight of the years, so he can't manage the latter bit of his sentence. I love Ronan bringing a fucking bird. I love that. Like he's just so okay. Chapter 13. Mom, why is Neve here? Blue asked. Like her mother, she was standing on the kitchen table. The moment she'd come back from school, Maura had enlisted her help for changing the bulbs in the badly designed stained glass creation that hung over the table. The complicated process required at least 3 hands and tended to be left until most of the bulbs had burned out. Blue hadn't minded helping. She needed something to keep her mind off Gansey's looming appointment, and of Adam's failure to call. When she thought about giving him her number the night before, she felt weightless and uncertain. She's family, Maura replied grimly. She savagely gripped the fixture's chain as she wrestled with a stubborn bulb. Family that comes home in the middle of the night? Maura shot Blue with a dark look. You were born with larger ears than I remember. She's just helping me look for something while she's here. The front door opened. Neither of them thought anything of it, as both Kala and Persephone were about the house somewhere. Kala was less likely, as she was an irascible, sedentary creature of habit, but Persephone tended to get caught in odd drafts and blow around. Adjusting her grip on the stained glass, Blue asked, What sort of something? Blue. What sort of something? A someone, Maura said, finally. What sort of someone? But before her mother had time to reply, they heard a man's voice. That is a strange way to run a business. They both turned slowly. Blue's arms had been lifted for so long they felt rubbery when she lowered them. The owner of the voice stood in the doorway to the front hall, his hands in his pockets. He was not old, maybe mid-20s, with a shock of black hair. He was handsome in a way that required a bit of work from the viewer. All of his facial features seemed just a little too large for his face. Maura glanced at Blue, an eyebrow lifted. Blue lifted one shoulder in response. He didn't seem like he was here to murder them or steal any portable electronics. And that, her mother said, releasing the beleaguered light fixture, is a very strange way to enter someone's home. I'm sorry, the young man said. There's a sign out front saying this is a place of business. There was indeed a sign out front, hand-painted, though Blue didn't know by whose hand, that read Psychic, and beneath that, By appointment only, Maura told the man. She grimaced into the kitchen. Blue had left a basket of clean laundry by the kitchen counter, and one of her mother's mauve lacy bras sat on top in full view. Blue refused to feel guilty. It wasn't as if she had expected men to be wandering through the kitchen. The man said, Well, then, I'd like to make an appointment. A voice from the doorway to the stairs made all 3 of them turn. We could do a triple reading for you, Persephone said. She stood at the base of the stairs, small and pale and made largely of hair. The man stared at her, though Blue wasn't sure if this was because he was considering Persephone's proposal or because Persephone was quite a lot to take in at first glance. "What?" the man asked finally. "Is that?" It took Blue a moment to realize that he meant triple reading rather than Persephone. Mora jumped off the table, landing with enough force that the glasses in the cabinet rattled. Blue climbed down more respectfully. She was, after all, holding a box of light bulbs. Mora explained, It's when three of us, Persephone, Kala, and I, read your cards at the same time and compare our interpretations. She doesn't offer that to just anyone, you know." "Is it more expensive?" "Not if you change that one stubborn bulb," Mora said, wiping her hands off on her jeans. "Fine," said the man, but he sounded vexed about it. Mora gestured for Blue to give a light bulb to the man, and then she said, "Persephone, would you get Kala?" "Oh, dear," Persephone said, in a small voice. And Persephone's voice was already quite small, so her small voice was indeed tiny, but she turned and went up the stairs. Her bare feet were soundless as she did. I'm sorry, I just love that little description. Persephone's voice was already quite small, so her small voice was indeed tiny. It's so cute. Her bare feet were soundless as she did. Mora eyed Blue, asking a question with her expression. Blue shrugged in agreement. "My daughter, Blue, will be in the room, if you don't mind. She makes the reading more clear." With a disinterested glance at Blue, the man climbed onto the table, which creaked a bit under the weight. He grunted as he tried to twist the stubborn bulb. "Now you see the problem," Mora said. "What is your name?" "Ah," he said, giving the bulb a jerk. "Can we leave this anonymous?" Mora said, "We're psychics, not strippers." Blue laughed, but the man didn't. She thought this was rather unfair of him. Maybe it was in slightly poor taste, but it was funny. The kitchen abruptly lightened as the new bulbs grooved into place. Without comment, he stepped onto a chair and then to the floor. "We'll be discreet," Mora promised. She gestured for him to follow her. In the reading room, the man looked around with clinical interest. His gaze passed over the candles, the potted plants, the incense burners, the elaborate dining room chandelier, the rustic table that dominated the room, the lace curtains, and finally landed on a framed photograph of Steve Martin. "Signed," Mora said, with some pride, noticing his attention. Then, Kala. Kala blew into the room, her eyebrows quite angry at being disturbed. She was wearing lipstick in a dangerous shade of plum, which made her mouth a small pursed diamond under her pointy nose. Kala gave the man a lacerating look that plumbed the depths of his soul. Look that plumbed the depths of his soul and found it wanting. Then she plucked her deck of cards from a shelf by Mora's head and flopped into a chair at the end of the table. Behind her, Persephone stood in the doorway, her hands clasping and unclasping each other. Blue slid hastily into a chair at the end of the table. The room seemed a lot smaller than it had a few minutes before. This was mostly Kala's fault. Persephone said in a kind voice, "Have a seat." And Kala said in an unkind one, "What is it you want to know?" The man dropped into a seat. Mora took the chair opposite from him at the table, with Kala and Persephone's hair on either side of her. Blue was, as always, just a little apart. "I would rather not say," the man said. "Maybe you'll tell me?" Kala's plum smile was positively fiendish. "Maybe." Mora slid her deck of cards across the table to the man and told him to shuffle them. He did so with proficiency and little self-consciousness. When he was done, Persephone and Kala did the same. "You've been to a reading before," Mora noted. Why did that come off so weird the first time I said it? Mora noted. He made only a vaguely grumbling noise of assent. Blue could see he thought that any information would let them fake the reading. Still, she didn't think he was a skeptic. He was merely skeptical of them. Mora slid her deck back from the man. She'd had her deck for as long as Blue had been paying attention, and the edges were fuzzy with handling. They were a standard tarot deck, only as impressive as she made them. She selected 10 cards and laid them out. Kala did the same with her slightly crisper deck. She had replaced them a few years ago after an unfortunate incident made her lose her taste for her previous deck. The room was quiet enough to hear the rustle of their cards against the uneven, pocked surface of the reading room. Persephone held her cards in her long, long hands, eyeing the man for a pregnant moment. Finally, she contributed only 2 cards, one at the beginning of the spread and one at the end. Blue loved watching Persephone lay down her cards. The limpid turn of her wrist and the swick of the card always made it seem like a sleight of hand or a ballet movement. Even the cards themselves seemed more otherworldly. Persephone's cards were slightly larger than Mora's and Kala's, and the art on them was curious. Spidery lines and smudgy backgrounds suggested the figures on each card. Blue had never seen another deck like it. Mora had told Blue once that it was hard to ask Persephone questions that you didn't absolutely need the answer to, so Blue had never found out where the deck had come from. Now that the cards were laid out, Mora, Kala, and Persephone studied the shape of them. Blue struggled to see over their huddled heads. She tried to ignore that, this close to the man, he had the overpowering chemical scent of a manly shower gel, the sort that normally came in a black bottle and was called something like shock, or excite, or blunt trauma. Kala was the first to speak. She flipped the three of swords around for the man to look at. On her card, the three of swords stabbed into a dark, bleeding heart, the color of her lips. "You've lost someone close to you." The man looked at his hands. "I have lost," he started, then considered before finishing, "many things." Mora pursed her lips. One of Kala's eyebrows edged toward her hair. They darted glances at each other. Blue knew them well enough to interpret the looks. Mora's asked, "What do you think?" Kala's said, "This is off." Persephone said nothing. Mora touched the edge of the Five of Pentacles. "Money's a concern," she noted. On her card, a man with a crutch limped through snow under a stained-glass window while a woman held a shawl beneath her chin. She added, "Because of a woman." The man's gaze was unflinching. "My parents had considerable resources. My father was implicated in a business scandal. Now they're divorced and there is no money. Not for me." It was a strangely unpleasant way to put it, relentlessly factual. Mora wiped her palms on her slacks. She gestured to another card. "And now you're in a tedious job. It's something you're good at, but tired of." His lips were thin with the truth of it. Persephone touched the first card she had drawn, the Knight of Pentacles. An armored man with cold eyes surveyed a field from the back of a horse, a coin in his hand. Blue thought if she looked closely at the coin, she could see a shape in it. 3 curving lines, a long beaked triangle, the shape from the courtyard from Mora's unmindful drawing, from the journal. But no, when she looked harder, it was just a faintly drawn 5-pointed star, the pentacle for which the card was named. Persephone finally spoke, in her small, precise voice. She told the man, "You're looking for something." The man's head jerked toward her. Kala's card, beside Persephone's, was also the Knight of Pentacles. It was unusual for 2 decks to agree exactly. Even stranger was to see that Mora's card was also the Knight of Pentacles. 3 cold-eyed knights surveyed the land before them. 3 again. Kala said bitterly, "You're willing to do whatever it takes to find it. You've been working at it for years." "Yes," the man snapped, surprising them all with the ferocity of his response. "But how much longer? Will I find it?" The women scanned the cards again, looking for an answer to his question. Blue looked too. She might not have had the sight, but she knew what the cards were supposed to mean. Her attention moved to the tower, which meant his life was about to change dramatically, to the last card in the reading, the Page of Cups. Blue glanced at her frowning mother. It wasn't that the Page of Cups was a negative card. In fact, it was the card Mora always said she thought represented Blue when she was doing a reading for herself. "You're the Page of Cups," Mora had told her once. "Look at all that potential she holds in that cup. Look, she even looks like you." And there was not just one Page of Cups in this reading. Like the Knight of Pentacles, it was tripled. 3 young people holding a cup full of potential, all wearing Blue's face. Mora's expression was dark, dark, dark. Blue's skin prickled. Suddenly she felt as if there was no end to the fate she was tied to. Gansey, Adam, that unseeable place in Neve's scrying bowl, the strange man sitting beside her. Her pulse was racing. Mora stood up so quickly that her chair keeled back against the wall. "The reading's done," she snapped. Persephone's gaze wandered up to Mora's face, bewildered, and Kala looked confused but delighted at the appearance of conflict. Blue didn't recognize her mother's face. "Excuse me," the man said. "The other cards." "You heard her," Kala said, all acid. Blue didn't know if Kala was also uneasy or if she was merely backing Mora up. "The reading's over." "Get out of my house," Mora said. Then, with an obvious attempt at solicitude, "Now, thank you. Goodbye." Kala moved aside for Mora to whirl past her to the front door. Mora pointed over the threshold. Rising to his feet, the man said, "I'm incredibly insulted." Mora didn't reply. As soon as he was clear of the doorway, she slammed the door shut behind him. The dishes in the cupboard rattled once again. Kala had moved to the window. She drew the curtains aside and leaned her forehead against the glass to watch him leave. Mora paced back and forth beside the table. Blue thought of asking a question, then stopped, then started again, then stopped. It seemed wrong to ask a question if no one else was. Persephone said, "What an unpleasant young man." Kala let the curtains drift shut. She remarked, "I got his license plate number." "I hope he never finds what he's looking for," Mora said. Retrieving her 2 cards from the table, Persephone said a little regretfully, "He's trying awfully hard. I rather think he'll find something." Mora whirled toward Blue. "Blue, if you ever see that man again, you just walk the other way." "No," Kala corrected. "Kick him in the nuts, then run the other way." I love it. It's a really good way to introduce the dynamic of the 3 of them together. Kala, Persephone, and Mora. Good things come in 3s. Good trio. Good friends. Sidekicks. I just think that it's very, very well done. Of the 3 of them, I don't think Persephone's my favorite, but I do think that she's the one that I am like, I hope I give off that vibe sometimes of, I love Kala, but I don't want to seem like I will beat people up if the opportunity arises. I mean, I will, but I don't want people to think that about me. I just want people to see me and be like, I'm not sure if I can remember all that later, but I'm going to try. You know, I want people to be, if I intrigue someone, I hope I intrigue them in that kind of way. In like that's a lot. That's a lot to look at. That makes sense. I also like how their dynamic kind of balances each other out. One's very angry, one's very peaceable, one's very in the middle, and can be either. Or. They're also a trio of best friends is really good. It's good stuff. Alright. More will be revealed later about who that guy was. If you haven't come to the conclusion of who it is yet. Chapter 14. Helen, Gansey's older sister, called right as Gansey got to the parish's dirt road. Accepting phone calls in the Pig was always tricky. The Camaro was a stick shift to start with, and as loud as a semi-truck to end with, and in between those 2 things were a host of steering problems, electrical interferences, and grimy gearshift knobs. The upshot was that Helen was barely audible, and Gansey nearly drove into the ditch. "When is Mom's birthday?" Helen asked. Gansey was simultaneously pleased to hear her voice and annoyed to be bothered by something so trivial. For the most part, he and his sister got along well. Gansey's siblings were a rare and complicated species, and they didn't have to pretend to be something they weren't around each other. "You're the wedding planner," Gansey said, as a dog ripped out of nowhere. It barked furiously, trying to bite the Camaro's tires. "Shouldn't dates be your realm of expertise?" "That means you don't remember," Helen replied. "And I'm not a wedding planner anymore. Well, part-time. Well, full-time, but not every day." Helen did not need to be anything. She didn't have careers. She had hobbies that involved other people's lives. "I do remember," he said tensely. "It's May 10th. A lab mix tied in front of the first house bayed dolorously as he passed. The other dog continued to worry at his tires, a snarl ascending with the engine note. 3 kids in sleeveless shirts stood in one of the yards shooting milk jugs with BB guns. They shouted, "Hey, Hollywood!" and affably aimed guns at the Pig's tires. They pretended to hold phones by their ears. Gansey felt a peculiar stab at the 3 of them, their camaraderie, their belonging, products of their surroundings. He wasn't sure if it was pity or envy. Everywhere was dust. Helen asked, "Where are you? You sound like you're on the set of a Guy Ritchie movie." "I'm going to see a friend." "The mean one or the white trash one?" "Helen." She replied, "Sorry, I meant Captain Frigid or Trailer Park Boy." "Helen!" Adam didn't live in a trailer park, technically, since every house was a double wide. Adam had told him that the last of the single wide trailers had been taken out a few years ago, but he had said it ironically, like even he knew that doubling the size of the trailers didn't change much. "Dad calls them worse things," Helen said. "Mom said one of your weird New Age books was delivered to the house yesterday. Are you coming home anytime soon?" "Maybe," Gansey said. Somehow seeing his parents always reminded him of how little he'd accomplished, how similar he and Helen were, how many red ties he owned, how he was slowly growing up to be everything Ronan was afraid of becoming. He pulled in the front of the light blue double-wide where the parishes lived. Maybe for Mom's birthday. I have to go. Things might get ugly. The cell phone speaker made Helen's laugh a hissing, pitchless thing. Listen to you sounding all badass. I bet you're just listening to a CD called The Sounds of Crime while you cruise for chicks outside the Old Navy in your Camaro. Bye, Helen, said Gansey. He clicked end and climbed out. Fat, shiny carpenter bees swooped at his head, distracted from their work of destroying the stairs. After he knocked, he looked out across the flat, ugly field of dead grass. The idea that you had to pay for the beauty in Henrietta should have occurred to him before then, but it hadn't. No matter how many times Adam told him he was foolish about money, he couldn't seem to get any wiser about it. There is no spring here, Gansey realized, and the thought was unexpectedly grim. Adam's mother answered his knock. She was a shadow of Adam, the same elongated features, the same wide-set eyes. In comparison to Gansey's mother, she seemed old and hard-edged. Adam's out back, she said, before he could ask her anything. She glanced to him and away, not holding his gaze. Gansey never failed to be amazed at how Adam's parents... I can't fucking talk. Okay. Gansey never failed to be amazed at how Adam's parents reacted to the Agley & Bee sweater. They knew everything they needed to know about him before he even opened his mouth. Thanks, Gansey said, but the word felt like sawdust in his mouth, and in any case she was already closing the door. Under the old carport behind the house, he found Adam lying beneath an old Bonneville pulled up onto ramps, initially invisible in the cool blue shadows. An empty oil pan protruded from under the car. There was no sound coming from beneath the car, and Gansey suspected that Adam wasn't working so much as avoiding being in the house. Hey, Tiger, Gansey said. Adam's knees bent as if he were going to scoot himself out from under the car, but then he didn't. What's up? He said flatly. Gansey knew what this meant. This failure to come out from beneath the car, and anger and guilt drew his chest tight. The most frustrating thing about the Adams situation was that Gansey couldn't control it. Not a single piece of it. He dropped a notebook onto the work table. Those are the notes from today. I couldn't tell them you were sick. You missed too much last month. Adam's voice was even. What did you tell him, then? One of the tools under the car made a half-hearted scraping sound. Come on, Parrish. Come out, Gansey said. Get it over with. Gansey jumped as a cold dog nose shoved into his dangling palm, the mutt that had so savagely attacked his tires earlier. He reluctantly fondled one of her stumpy ears and then jerked his head back as she leapt at the car, barking at Adam's feet when they started to move. The ripped jeans of Adam's camo cargo pants appeared first, then his faded Coca-Cola t-shirt, then finally his face. A bruise spread over his cheekbone, red and swelling as a galaxy. A darker one snaked over the bridge of his nose. Gansey said immediately, You're leaving with me. It'll only make it worse when I come back, Adam told him. I mean for good. Move into Monmouth. Enough's enough. Adam stood up. The dog pranced delightedly around his feet as if he'd been gone to another planet instead of merely underneath a car. Wearily, he asked, And what about when Glendower takes you away from Henrietta? Gansey couldn't say it wouldn't happen. You come with me. I come with? Tell me how that would work. I lose all the work I put in at Agley & I have to play the game again at another school. Adam had once told Gansey, rags to riches isn't a story anyone wants to hear until after it's done. But it was a story that was hard to finish when Adam had missed school yet again. There was no happy ending without passing grades. Gansey said, You wouldn't have to go to a school like Agley & It doesn't have to be an Ivy League. There are different ways to be successful. At once, Adam said, I don't judge you for what you do, Gansey. And this was an uneasy place to be, because Gansey knew it took a lot for Adam to accept his reasons for chasing Glendower. Adam had plenty of reasons to be indifferent about Gansey's nebulous anxiety. His questioning of why the universe had chosen him to be born to affluent parents, wondering if there was some greater purpose that he was alive. Gansey knew he had to make a difference, had to make a bigger mark on the world because of the head start he'd been giving, or he was the worst sort of person out there. The poor are sad they're poor, Adam had once mused, and turns out the rich are sad they're rich. And Ronan had said, Hey, I'm rich, and it doesn't bother me. Out loud, Gansey said, Fine, then, we'd find another good school. We'd play the game, we make up a new life for you. Adam reached past him to find a rag and began to wipe between each greasy finger. I would have to find jobs, too. This didn't happen overnight. Do you know how long it took me to find these? He didn't mean working in the carport outside his father's double-wide. That was merely a chore. Adam held down 3 jobs, the most important of which was at the trailer factory just outside Henrietta. I could cover you until you found something. There was a very long silence as Adam continued scrubbing his fingers. He didn't look up at Gansey. This was a conversation they'd had before, and entire days of arguments were replayed in the few moments of quiet. The words had been said often enough that they didn't need to be said again. Success meant nothing to Adam if he hadn't done it for himself. Gansey tried his best to keep his voice even, but a bit of heat crept in. So you won't leave because of your pride? He'll kill you. You've watched too many cop shows. I've watched the evening news, Adam, Gansey snapped. Why don't you let Ronan teach you how to fight? He's offered twice now. He means it. With great care... Sorry. With great care, Adam folded the greasy rag and draped it back over a toolbox. There was a lot of stuff in the carport. New tool racks and calendars of topless women and heavy-duty air compressors and other things Mr. Parrish had decided were more valuable than Adam's school uniform. Because then he will kill me. I don't follow. Adam said, He has a gun. Gansey said, Christ. Laying a hand on the mutt's head, it drove her insane with happiness. Adam leaned out of the carport to look down the dirt road. He didn't have to tell Gansey what he was watching for. Come on, Adam, said Gansey. In italics it says, please. That's in his thoughts. Please. And then, in quotations, we'll make it work. A wrinkle formed between Adam's eyebrows as he looked away. Not at the double wides in the foreground, but past them to the flat, endless fields with its tufts of dry grass. So many things survived here without really living. He said, If it means I never get to be my own person, if I let you cover me, then I'm yours. I'm his now, and then I'll be yours. It struck Gansey harder than he thought it would. Some days, all that grounded him was the knowledge that his and Adam's friendship existed in a place that money couldn't influence. Anything that spoke to the contrary hurt Gansey more than he would have admitted out loud. With precision, he asked, Is that what you think of me? You don't know, Gansey, Adam said. You don't know anything about money, even though you got all of it. You don't know how it makes people look at me and at you. It's all they need to know about us. They'll think I'm your monkey. I am only my money. It is all anyone sees, even Adam. Gansey shot back. You think your plans are going to keep working when you miss school and work because you let your dad pound the shit out of you? You're as bad as her. You think you deserve it. Without warning, Adam slammed a small box of nails off the ledge beside him. The sound it made on the concrete startled both of them. Adam turned his back to Gansey, his arms crossed. Don't pretend you know, he said. Don't come here and pretend you know anything. Gansey told himself to walk away, to say nothing else. Then he said, Don't pretend you have anything to be proud of, then. As soon as he said it, he knew that it wasn't fair, or even if it had been fair, it wasn't right. But he wasn't sorry he'd said it. He went back to the Camaro and took his phone out to call Ronan, but the cell signal had completely disappeared, like it often did in Henrietta. Usually, Gansey took that as a sign that something supernatural was affecting the energy around the town, knocking down the cell signal and sometimes even the electricity. Now, he thought it probably just meant he wasn't getting through to anyone. Closing his eyes, he thought about the bruise on Adam's face, with its spreading soft edges and the hard red mark over his nose. He imagined coming here one day and finding that Adam wasn't here, but in the hospital. Or worse, that Adam was here, but that something important had been beaten out of him. Even imagining it made him feel sick. The car jerked, then, and Gansey's eyes came open as the passenger door groaned. Wait, Gansey, Adam said, out of breath. He was all folded over to be able to look inside. His bruise looked ghastly. It made his skin seem transparent. Don't leave Sliding his hands off the wheel and into his lap, Gansey peered up at him. This was the part where Adam was going to tell him not to take what he'd said personally, but it felt personal. I'm only trying to help. I know, Adam told him. I know, but I can't do it that way. I can't live with myself that way. Gansey didn't understand, but he nodded. He wanted it to be over. He wanted it to be yesterday, when he and Ronan and Adam were listening to the recorder and Adam's face was still unmarked. Behind Adam, he saw the figure of Mrs. Parrish watching from the porch. Adam closed his eyes for a minute. Gansey could see his irises moving underneath the thin skin of his eyelids, a dreamer awake. And then, in one easy movement, he slid into the passenger seat. Gansey's mouth opened to form a question he didn't ask. Let's go, Adam said. He didn't look at Gansey. His mother stared at them from the front porch, but he didn't look at her either. The psychic was the plan, right? We're doing the plan. Yes, but I need to be back by 10. Now Adam looked at Gansey. There was something fierce and chilling in his eyes, an unnameable something that Gansey was always afraid would eventually take over completely. This, he knew, was a compromise, a risky gift that he could choose to reject. After a moment of hesitation, Gansey bumped knuckles with him over the gear shift. Adam rolled down the window and gripped the roof as if he needed to hold on. As the Camaro headed slowly out of the single-track road, their path was blocked by a blue Toyota pickup truck approaching from the other way. Adam's breath stopped audibly. Through the windshield, Gansey met the eyes of Adam's father. Robert Parrish was a big thing, colorless as August, grown from the dust that surrounded the trailers. His eyes were dark and small, and Gansey could see nothing of Adam in them. Robert Parrish spit out the window. He didn't pull over for them to pass. Adam's face was turned out to the cornfield, but Gansey didn't look away. "You don't have to come," said Gansey, because he had to say it. Adam's voice came from far away. "I'm coming." Jerking the wheel of the car, Gansey revved the engine up high. The pig stormed off the road, clouds of dirt exploding from the tires, and slammed through the shallow ditch. His heart thudded with anticipation and danger, and the desire to shout everything he thought about Adam's father to Adam's father. As they charged back onto the driveway on the other side of the Toyota, Gansey could feel Robert Parrish's stare follow them. The weight of that gaze seemed like a more substantial promise of the future than anything a psychic might tell him. Oh, man. Oh, man. I don't know if I was supposed to do trigger warnings at the beginning. I feel like if anyone is ever, like, listening to a book being read, that they probably, and they were concerned about that, they probably search up, did the dog die about it? So, I don't think any dogs die in this. Honestly, I don't remember. I mean, death is a prevalent thing in all things. They're literally talking about death right at the beginning. So, you know, she's gonna kill someone when she gets on a little kiss. But yeah. TW abuse. Child abuse. Yeah. I know you remember, I think you might remember. I don't know if this was a conversation between me and my siblings, or if you were there when they were talking about it. But the one that has already read the books to me, she was saying that she doesn't like Adam, or he's not her favorite. Not that she doesn't like him, but he's not her favorite, and which is funny to her because a lot of people really like Adam and like he's their favorite character, and her favorite character is either Gansey or Ronan. I don't know, but Blue's the one that reminds me the most of you. So there's that. Heart hands emoji. The hands doing the heart emoji. I love Blue a lot. She's such a funky person. I mean, I don't want to describe her as like, oh, she's quirky, and that's the thing about her. But she's funky and gnarly, and just imagine a lot of the adjectives that I like to use that are, the kind of adjectives that remind you of things that you would find in vintage garage sales. And those adjectives are what make me think of Blue. Like descriptors that are like good, that are like describing things that are cool. Sick. But also, like, she's interesting, you know? She has so many things that she wants. And that's cool. It's cool to have a character that wants things. That it's important that when you write a character that's like, it's important when you write a character who is very like, their silhouette is definable, you know, a character that you're like, I don't know if I've ever talked about this to you, but you know that thing about like how they're like, when they make cartoon characters and stuff, how their silhouette has to be like, knowable or memorable or something. Every time I think about that, I'm like, and that when you make a character like that, who's supposed to be a memorable character, even when it's like written, who's supposed to be like, if you describe things about them, and to someone who has read the book, that they'll get them pretty quickly. When you think of Blue, you think of like, clothes that have a bunch of things added to them that are funky and weird. You think of candles and lampshades and things like that. I just think of like patchwork designs and collages and putting a bunch of things on your wall that are weird and funky and stuff. In that way of who Blue is as a character, it's important that when you write a character that has a memorable silhouette, even just like writing wise, a memorable description silhouette. I don't know, I'm trying to draw lines here. Pretend the lines exist, okay? Every time you do that, you have to make sure that they have things that they want. And it can't just be so surface level as they want to be weird. And it can be related to the main plot. Like, she wants to see something that no one else has seen. Which, this book is about magic. It is about finding things. But it's also about love and friendship and blah, 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 blah. So, I just think it's really important, to me, at least, that Blue's, like, that she's like this. That despite the fact that, you know, an easy way to describe her would be a quirky girl, you know? She is not just quirky girl. She yearns, you know? And I think it's really important that those different, like, ways in which she yearns are defined later on, even more and more. Without every moment that she gets, she wants something. And that's really important to have when you have a character that is so definable with their silhouette that they are reaching for something. They are working for something. She wants to be, not only does she want to be able to afford life, she wants to see beautiful things. She wants to live a beautiful life. She wants to have people that are odd like her. She wants to make cool and interesting things. She wants. And, you know, when you think of, like, the written YN, quirky girl, messy bun, blah, 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 sure, you could fit her into that, like, the vestigial ponytail. Hair cut and worked to be in such a way that it is so difficult to put her hair up. She has to use a bunch of barrettes so that her hair is, like, a mess of spiky tufts of hair. I don't think that she fits into a two-dimensional self-insert girl in a sweatshirt and messy bun. And there's nothing wrong with girl in a sweatshirt and messy bun, okay? I love a messy bun. I mean, my hair is just slightly long enough to be able to be put in a messy bun. And we love sweatshirts, okay? Snap, snap, snap. But she's not so two-dimensional. I think that to boil her down to that description is a true testament to her character. She's just so much more worthwhile to be described as an aspirational person. She wants things. She's working towards things. She seeks things. She's got flaws. She's got strengths. She's got important characteristics. She's got goals. Like, she's got the D&D flaws, bonds, strength, weaknesses, or whatever. You know, the side on a D&D character sheet where you're supposed to do flaws, bonds, stuff. And sometimes sometimes people will roll for them, which is just like, oh my god. Anyways, imagine having to roll a D6 to decide what your character's fucking personality is. No, okay. All the love to people who do that. I shouldn't be a bitch. I really shouldn't be a bitch. I'm so sorry. Okay. It's perfectly reasonable if you're feeling like it. But I feel like if you're writing a D&D character, if you're making a D&D character and you're rolling, you've got to be doing it for a bit. There's no way that you're... okay. Truly, there's no way anyone rolls for the flaws, bonds, and ideals and whatever thing on a D&D character sheet on the background in the player's handbook. No way people actually do that for the purpose of creating their own fleshed out character. Maybe they do it as, like, a starting point because they're like, I'm just not sure. I've just been building the character sheet. I haven't actually thought about who they are. And maybe they're doing that as a starting point, but no way that is the exclusive template they work by. Because if you are... Jesus mother fucking Christ. Okay. I mean, do what you want in life. That's what it's all about, baby. I need to stop being such a judgmental fucking asshole. Okay, so sorry. So sorry. I'm so sorry. Oh no, I am so sorry. Okay. I've been yapping for too long. I've been trying to space these out in intervals each chapter so that I like give my thoughts on each chapter so that it's more like, I guess, podcast like for you rather than just audiobook like for you, so that it feels more like a conversation. But dude, I'm a little bit worried that sometimes I ramble a little too long. But you love me, you know? I carried you for like 5 seconds today because you were shoeless and sockless and we were outside and you didn't want to step on broken glass, and then my back did not want to. So, but you let me pick you up and carry you for like a solid 5 seconds. So you love me, you know? You love hearing me talk. You love seeing me do things. You listen to my ramblings as I talk to your cat like I'm a mob boss and she's my little goon. Don't make a joke about that. Okay, chapter 15. Okay, chapter 15. Of course, Gansey was not on time for his reading. The appointment time came and went. No Gansey. And perhaps more disappointingly, no phone call from Adam. Blue pulled aside the curtains to glance up and down the street, but there was nothing but normal after-work traffic. Maura made excuses. Maybe he wrote down the wrong time, she said. Blue didn't think he'd written down the wrong time. 10 more minutes slouched by. Maura said, maybe he had car trouble. Blue didn't think he had car trouble. Kala retrieved the novel she'd been reading and started downstairs. Her voice carried down toward them. That reminds me, you need to get that belt looked at on the Ford. I see a breakdown in your future. Next to that sketchy furniture store, a very ugly man with a cell phone will stop and be overly helpful. It was possible she really did see a breakdown in Maura's future, but it was also possible she was being hyperbolic. In any case, Maura made a note on the calendar. Maybe I accidentally told him tomorrow afternoon instead of today, Maura said. Persephone murmured, that is always possible, and said, perhaps I will make a pie. Blue looked anxiously to Persephone. Pie making was a lengthy and loving process, and Persephone did not like to be interrupted during it. She wouldn't begin a pie if she really thought Gansey's arrival would interrupt her. Maura eyed Persephone as well before retrieving a bag of yellow squash and a stick of butter from the fridge. Now Blue knew precisely how the rest of the day was going to go. Persephone would make something sweet. Maura would make something with butter. Eventually Kala would reappear and make something involving sausage or bacon. It was how every evening went if a meal hadn't been planned in advance. Blue didn't think that Maura had told Gansey tomorrow afternoon instead of today. What she thought was that Gansey had looked at the clock on his Mercedes-Benz dashboard or Aston Martin's radio and had decided that the reading interfered with his rock climbing or racquetball, and then he'd blown it off just like Adam had blown off calling her. She couldn't really be surprised. They'd done exactly what she expected from Raven boys. Just as Blue was getting ready to sulk upstairs with her needles and her homework, Orla howled from the phone room, her wordless wail eventually resolving itself into words. There is a 1973 Camaro in front of the house. It matches my nails. The last time Blue had seen Orla's nails, they'd been a complicated paisley pattern. She wasn't exactly sure what a 1973 Camaro looked like, but she was sure that if it was paisley, it must be impressive. She was also certain that Orla must be on the phone, or she would have been down here ogling. Well, here we go, Maura said, abandoning her squash in the sink. Kala reappeared in the kitchen, exchanging a sharp look with Persephone. Blue's stomach dropped to her feet. Gansey, that's all there is. The doorbell rang. Are you ready? Kala asked Blue. Gansey was either the boy she killed or fell in love with, or both. There was no being ready. There was just this. Maura opening the door. There were 3 boys in the doorway, backlit by the evening sun, as Neve had been so many weeks ago. 3 sets of shoulders, one square, one built, one wiry. Sorry I'm late, said the boy in the front, with the square shoulders. The scent of mint rolled in with him, just as it had in the churchyard. Will it be a problem? Blue knew that voice. She reached for the railing of the stairs to keep her balance as President's cell phone stepped into the hallway. Oh no, not him. All this time she'd been wondering how Gansey might die, and it turned out she was going to strangle him. At Nino's, the blare of the music had drowned out the finer points of his voice, and the odor of garlic had overwhelmed the scent of mint. But now that she put 2 and 2 together, it seemed obvious. Okay, before we move on, I do want to say, I think it's really interesting that Blue doesn't really say a lot when she's in the company of her family, she only really does it if she's asking questions. She's very much like a listener. Just like most of the times that she talks, she's asking questions to them. And I just wanted to note that throughout the throughout the times that she's like, you know, listening to them talking, like Mora saying maybe he wrote down the wrong time, Blue doesn't respond. And Mora saying maybe he had car trouble, Blue doesn't respond. And Collis talking about the car, Blue doesn't say anything. Mora saying maybe I accidentally told him tomorrow instead of today. She doesn't respond. Persephone saying that she might make a pie. She doesn't say anything. Orla shouting about the 1973 Camaro. Blue doesn't say anything. Even before the door opens and Mora's like, well, here we go. And she's like, you know, walking away from the kitchen, or walking to the door. Blue doesn't say anything. Even when Kala directly asks Blue a question of, are you ready? Blue doesn't respond. Just very interesting to me that, like, in a house full of people who are talking to things that you can't see, that are seeing and hearing and listening and communing with things that are otherworldly. She is, and her being an outsider there, she doesn't even seem to treat it like she doesn't talk to them. She does, I mean, she does, but she doesn't really respond to them. She's just always paying attention. And I think that is really interesting about her. Anyways, but now we're gonna go back one sentence. But now that she put two and two together, it seemed obvious. In their hallway, he looked slightly less presidential, but only because the heat had made him messily roll up the sleeves of his button-down shirt and remove his tie. His dusty brown hair was mussed, too, in that way that Virginia Warmth always managed. But the watch was still there, large enough to knock out bank robbers, and he still had that handsome glow. The glow that meant that not only had he never been poor, but his father hadn't, nor his father's father, nor his father's father's father. She couldn't tell if he was actually tremendously good-looking or merely tremendously wealthy. Perhaps they were the same thing. Gansey. This was Gansey. And that meant that the journal belonged to him. That meant that Adam belonged to him. Well, Mora said. It was clear her curiosity overruled all rules of scheduling. It's not too late. Come into the reading room. Can I get some names? Because of course President's cell phone had brought most of his posse from Nino's, everyone but the smudgy boy. They filled the hallway to overflowing, somehow, the three of them, loud and male and so comfortable with one another that they allowed no one else to be comfortable with them. They were a pack of sleek animals, armored with their watches and their topsiders, and the expensive cut of their uniforms. Even the sharp boy's tattoo, cutting up the knobs of his spine above his collar, was a weapon, somehow slicing at Blue. Gansey, President's cell phone said, again, pointing to himself. Adam, Ronan. Where do you want us? There? He pointed a hand toward the reading room, palm flat, like he was directing traffic. In there, Mora agreed. This is my daughter, by the way. She'll be present for the reading, if you don't mind. Gansey's eyes found Blue. He'd been smiling politely, but now his face froze in the middle of a smile. Hi again, he said. This is awkward. You've met? Mora shot a poisonous look at Blue. Blue felt unfairly persecuted. Yes, Gansey replied with dignity. We had a discussion about alternative professions for women. I didn't realize she was your daughter. Adam? He shot a nearly as poisonous look at Adam, whose eyes were large. Adam was the only one not in uniform, and his palm was spread across his chest as if his fingers could cover his faded Coca-Cola t-shirt. I didn't know either, Adam said. If Blue had known he was coming, she might not have worn her baby blue top with the feathers sewn into the collar. He was staring at it. To Blue, he said, I didn't know, I swear. What happened to your face? Blue asked. Adam shrugged ruefully. Either he or Ronan smelled like a parking garage. His voice was self-deprecating. Do you think it makes me look tougher? What it did was make him look what the fuck is this sentence? What it did was make him look was more fragile and dirty, somehow, but like a teacup unearthed from the soil. But Blue didn't say that. Ronan said, it makes you look like a loser. Ronan, said Gansey. I need everyone to sit down, shouted Mara. It was such an alarming thing to hear Mora shout at that nearly everyone did, sinking or throwing themselves into the mismatched furniture in the reading room. Adam rubbed a hand over his cheekbone as if he could remove the bruise from it. Gansey sat in an armchair at the head of the table, his hands stretched over either arm like the chairman of the board, one eyebrow raised as he looked at Steve Martin's framed face. Only Kala and Ronan remained standing, and they regarded each other warily. It still felt like there had never been this many people in the house, which was utterly untrue. It was possibly true that there had never been this many men in the house before. Certainly never this many Raven boys. Blue felt as if their very presence robbed something from her. They'd made her family dingy just by coming here. It is, Mora said, too damn loud in here. The way she said it, though, holding one finger to her pulse, just under her jawbone, told Blue that it was not their voices that were too loud. It was something she was hearing inside her head. Persephone, too, was wincing. Do I need to leave? Blue asked, though that was the last thing she wanted. Gansey, misunderstanding, immediately asked her, Why would you have to leave? She makes things louder for us, Mora said. She was frowning over all of them, as if she was trying to make sense of it. And you three are very loud already. Blue's skin was hot. She could imagine herself heating like an electrical conduit, sparks from all parties traveling through her. What could these Raven boys have going on under their skins that could deafen her mother? Was it all of them in conjunction, or was it merely Gansey, his energy screaming out the countdown to his death? What do you mean, very loud? Gansey asked. He was, Blue thought, very clearly the ringleader of this little pack. They all kept looking to him for their cues of how to interpret the situation. I mean that there is something about your energies that is very... Mora trailed off, losing interest in her own explanation. She turned to Persephone. Blue recognized the look exchanged between them. It was, what is going on? How do we even do this? The way she asked it, distracted and vague, made Blue's stomach clench with nerves. Her mother was undone. For the second time, a reading seemed to be pushing her to a place she wasn't comfortable with. One at a time, Persephone suggested, her voice nearly inaudible. Kala said, One-offs. You'll have to, or some of them will have to leave. They're just too noisy. Adam and Gansey glanced at each other. Ronan picked at the leather straps around his wrist. What is a one-off? Gansey asked. How is it different from a regular reading? Kala spoke to Mora as if he hadn't said anything at all. It doesn't matter what they want. It is what it is. Take it or leave it. Mora's finger was still pressed under her jaw. She told Gansey, A one-off is where you each draw just one card from a deck of tarot cards, and we interpret. Gansey and Adam shared some sort of private conversation with their eyes. It was the sort of thing Blue was used to transpiring between her mother and Persephone or Kala, and she hadn't thought anyone else really capable of it. It also made her feel strangely jealous. She wanted something like that, a bond strong enough to transcend words. Adam's head jerked a nod in response to whatever Gansey's unspoken statement might have been, and Gansey said, Whatever you're comfortable with. Persephone and Mora momentarily debated, though it didn't seem like they'd be comfortable with anything in the moment. Wait, Persephone said as Mora produced her deck of cards. Have Blue deal it. It wasn't the first time Blue had been asked to deal the cards. Sometimes, at difficult or important readings, the women wanted Blue to touch the deck first, to hone whatever messages the cards might contain. This time, she was overly aware of the boys' attention as she took the cards from her mother. For the boys' benefit, she shuffled the deck in a slightly theatrical fashion, moving cards from one hand to another. She was very good at card tricks that didn't involve any psychic talent whatsoever. As the boys, impressed, watched the cards fly back and forth, Blue mused that she would make an excellent fake psychic. No one volunteered immediately to go first, so she offered the deck to Adam. He met her gaze and held it for a moment. There was something forceful and intentional about the gesture, more aggressive than he'd been the night he approached her. Selecting a card, Adam presented it to Mora. Two of Swords, she said. Blue was over-aware of her mother's Henrietta accent, suddenly rural and uneducated sounding to her ear. Was that how Blue sounded? Mora continued. You're avoiding a hard choice, acting by not acting. You're ambitious, but you feel like someone's asking something of you you're not willing to give, asking you to compromise your principles. Someone close to you, I think. Your father? Brother, I think, Persephone said. I don't have a brother, ma'am, Adam replied, but Blue saw his eyes dart to Gansey. Do you want to ask a question? Mora asked. Adam considered. What's the right choice? Mora and Persephone conferred. Mora replied, There isn't a right one, just one that you can live with. There might be a third option that will suit you better, but right now you're not seeing it because you're so involved with the other two. I'd guess from what I'm seeing that any other path would have to do with you going outside those other two options and making your own option. I'm also sensing you're a very analytical thinker. You spend a lot of time learning to ignore your emotions, but I don't think this is the time for that. Thanks, Adam said. It wasn't quite the right thing to say, but it wasn't entirely wrong either. Blue liked how polite he was. It seemed different than Gansey's politeness. When Gansey was polite, it made him powerful. When Adam was polite, he was giving power away. It seemed right to leave Gansey for last, so Blue moved on to Ronan, though she was a little afraid of him. Something about him dripped venom, even though he hadn't spoken. Worst of all, in Blue's opinion, was that there was something about his antagonism that made her want to court his favor, to earn his approval. The approval of someone like him, who clearly cared for no one. It seemed like it would be worth more. To offer the deck to Ronan, Blue had to stand because he still stood by the doorway near Kala. They looked ready to box. When Blue fanned the cards, he scanned the women in the room and said, "I'm not taking one. Tell me something true first." "Beg your pardon?" Kala said stiffly, answering for Mora. Ronan's voice was glass, cold and brittle. "Everything you told him could apply to anybody. Anybody with a pulse has doubts. Anybody alive has argued with their brother or their father. Tell me something no one else can tell me. Don't toss a playing card at me and spoon-feed me some Jungian bullshit. Tell me something specific." Blue's eyes narrowed. Persephone stuck out her tongue slightly. A habit born of uncertainty, not impudence. Mora shifted with annoyance. "We don't do specific..." Kala interrupted. "A secret killed your father, and you know what it was." The room went deadly silent. Both Persephone and Mora were staring at Kala. Gansey and Adam were staring at Ronan. Blue was staring at Kala's hand. Mora often called on Kala to do joint tarot readings, and Persephone sometimes called on her to interpret her dreams. But very rarely did anyone ask Kala to use one of her strangest gifts, psychometry. Kala had an uncanny ability to hold an object and sense its origin, feel its owner's thoughts, and see places the thing had been. Now, Kala pulled her hand away. She'd reached to touch Ronan's tattoo right where it met his collar. His face was turning just slightly, looking to where her fingers had been. There might have only been Ronan and Kala in the room. He was a head taller than her already, but he looked young beside her, like a lanky wild cat not yet up to weight. She was a lioness. She hissed, "What are you?" Ronan's smile chilled Blue. There was something empty in it. "Ronan?" Gansey asked, concern in his voice. "I'm waiting in the car." Without further comment, Ronan left, slamming the door hard enough that the dishes in the kitchen rattled. Gansey turned an accusatory gaze on Kala. "His father's dead." "I know," Kala said. Her eyes were slits. Gansey's voice was cordial enough to pass straight through polite and onto rude. "I don't know how you found out, but that's a pretty lousy thing to throw at a kid." "At a snake, you mean," Kala snarled back. "And what is it you came for if you didn't believe we could do what we're charging you for? He asked for a specific, I gave him a specific. I'm sorry it wasn't puppies." "Kala," Mora said at the same time that Adam said, "Gansey." Adam murmured something directly into Gansey's ear and then leaned back. A bone moved at Gansey's jawline. Blue saw him shift back into present cell phone. She hadn't been aware before that he'd been anything else. Now she wished she'd been paying better attention so she could have seen what was different about him. Gansey said, "I'm sorry. Ronan is blunt and he wasn't comfortable coming here in the first place. I wasn't trying to insinuate that you were less than genuine. Can we continue?" He sounded so old, Blue thought. So formal in comparison to the other boys he'd brought. There was something intensely discomfiting about him, akin to how she felt compelled to impress Ronan. Something about Gansey made her feel so strongly other that it was as if she had to guard her emotions against him. She could not like him, or whatever it was about these boys that drowned out her mother's psychic abilities, and filled the room to overflowing, would overwhelm her. "You're fine," Mora said, though she looked at glowering Kala when she said it. As Blue moved to where Gansey sat, she caught a glimpse of his car at the curb. A flash of impossible orange, the sort of orange Orla would definitely paint her nails. It was not exactly what she'd have expected an Agley and B-boy to drive. They liked shiny, new things, and this was they liked new, shiny things, but this was an old, shiny thing. And this was an old, shiny thing, but it was clearly a Raven boy's car nonetheless. And just then, Blue had a falling sensation, like things were happening too fast for her to properly absorb them. There was something odd and complicated about all of these boys, Blue thought. Odd and complicated in the way that the journal was odd and complicated. Their lives were somehow a web, and she had somehow managed to do something to get herself stuck in the very edge of it. Whether that something had been done in the past or was going to be done in the future seemed irrelevant. In this room with Mora and Kala and Persephone, time felt circular. She stopped in front of Gansey. This close, she again caught the scent of mint, and that made Blue's heart trip unsteadily. Gansey looked down at the fanned deck of cards in her hands. When she saw him like that, she saw the bend of his shoulders and the back of his head, and she piercingly remembered his spirit, the boy she'd been afraid she'd fall in love with. That shade hadn't worn any of the effortless, breezy confidence of this raven boy in front of her. "What happens to you, Gansey?" she wondered. "When do you become that person?" Gansey looked up at her, and there was a crease between his eyebrows. "I don't know how to choose. Could you pick a card for me? Will that work?" Out of the corner of her eye, Blue saw Adam shifting in his chair, frowning. Persephone answered from behind. "Blue, if you want it to." "It's about intention," Mora added. "I want you to," he said. "Please." Blue fanned the cards across the table. They slithered loosely over the finish. She let her fingers float above them. Once, Mora had told her that the correct cards sometimes felt warm or tingly when her fingers were near them. For Blue, of course, each card felt identical. One, however, had slid farther than the others, and that was the one she chose. As she flipped it over, she let out a helpless laugh. She let out a little helpless laugh. I'm sorry. The Page of Cups looked back at Blue with her own face. It felt like someone was laughing at her, but she had no one to blame for the selection of the card but herself. When Mora saw it, her voice went still and remote. "Not that one. Make him choose another." "Mora," said Persephone mildly, but Mora just waved her hand, dismissing her. "Another one," she insisted. "What's wrong with that one?" Gansey asked. "It has Blue's energy on it," Mora said. "It wasn't meant to be yours. You'll have to pick it yourself." Persephone moved her mouth back and forth, but she didn't say anything. Blue replaced the card and shuffled the deck with less drama than before. When she offered the cards to him, Gansey turned his face away like he was pulling a raffle winner. His fingers grazed the edges of the cards, contemplative. He selected one, then flipped it over to show the room. It was the Page of Cups. He looked at the face on the card, and then at Blue's face, and Blue knew that he'd seen the similarity. Mora leaned forward and snatched the card from his fingers. "Pick another one." "Now why?" Gansey said. "What's wrong with that card? What does it mean?" "Nothing's wrong with it," Mora replied. "It's just not yours." Now, for the first time, Blue saw an edge of true aggravation to Gansey's expression, and it made her like him a little better. So there was something below the Raven Boy exterior, maybe. Flippantly, Gansey snagged another card, clearly finished with this exercise. With a flourish, he turned the card over and slapped it on the table. Blue swallowed. Mora said, "That's your card." On the card, on the table, was a black knight astride a white horse. The knight's helmet was lifted so that it was obvious that his face was a bare skull dominated by eyeless sockets. The sun set beyond him, and below his horse's hooves lay a corpse. Outside the windows behind them, a breeze hissed audibly through the trees. "Death," Gansey read the bottom of the card. He didn't sound surprised or alarmed. He just read the words like he would read eggs or Cincinnati. "Great job, Mora," Kala said. Her arms were crossed firmly over her chest. "You gonna interpret that for the kid?" "Possibly we should just give him a refund," Persephone suggested, although Gansey had not paid yet. "I thought that psychics didn't predict death," Adam said quietly. "I read that the death card was only symbolic." Mora and Kala and Persephone all made vague noises. Blue, utterly aware of the truth of Gansey's fate, felt ill. Aggelian be boy or not, he was only her age, and he obviously had friends who cared for him and a life that involved a very orange car, and it was hideous to know he'd be dead in less than 12 months. "Actually," Gansey said, "I don't care about that." Every pair of eyes in the room was on him, as he stood the card on its end to study it. "I mean, the cards are very interesting," he said. He said, "The cards are very interesting," like someone would say, "This is very interesting," to a very strange sort of cake that they didn't quite want to finish. "And I don't want to discount what you do, but I didn't really come here to have my future told to me. I'm quite okay with finding that out for myself." He cast a quick glance at Kala at this, obviously realizing that he was walking a fine line between polite and Ronin. "Really, I came because I was hoping to ask you a question about energy," Gansey continued. "I know you deal with energy work, and I've been trying to find a ley line I think is near Henrietta. Do you know anything about that?" In italics it says, "The journal." "Ley line," Mora repeated. "Maybe. I don't know if I know it by that name. What is it?" Blue was a little stunned. She'd always thought her mother was the most truthful person around. They're straight energy lines that crisscross the globe, Gansey explained. They're supposed to connect major spiritual places. Adam thought you might know about them because you deal with energy. It was obvious that he meant the corpse road, but Mora didn't offer any information. She just pressed her lips together and looked at Persephone and Kala. Does that ring a bell with you two? Persephone pointed a finger straight in the air and then said, I forgot about my pie crust. She withdrew from the room. Kala said, I'd have to think about it. I'm not good with specifics. There was a faint, amused smile on Gansey's face that meant he knew they were lying. It was a strangely wise expression. Once again, Blue got the sense that he seemed older than the boys he'd brought with him. I'll look into it, Mora said. If you leave your number, I can give you a call if I find anything out about it. Gansey replied, coolly polite. Oh, that's quite all right. How much for the reading? Standing, Mora said. Oh, just 20. Blue thought this was criminal. Gansey clearly had spent more than $20 on the laces for his topsiders. He frowned at Mora over the top of his open wallet. There were a lot of bills in it. They could have been ones, but Blue doubted it. She could also see his driver's license through a clear window. Not closely enough to make out the details, but close enough to see that the name printed on it looked a lot longer than just Gansey. 20? Each, Blue added. Kala coughed into her fist. Gansey's face cleared and he handed Mora $60. Quite obviously, this was more what he'd been expecting to pay, and now the world was right again. It was Adam, though, who Blue noticed then. He was looking at her, sharp-eyed, and she felt transparent and guilty. Not only about overcharging, but about Mora's lie. Blue had seen Gansey's spirit walk the corpse road, and she had known his name before he walked in the door. Like her mother, she'd said nothing, so she was complicit. I'll show you out, Mora said. She was clearly eager to see them on the other side of the door. For a moment, it looked as if Gansey felt the same, but then he stopped. He paid an undue amount of attention to his wallet as he folded it and reinserted it into his pocket, and then he looked up to Mora and made a firm line of his mouth. Look, we're all adults here, he started. Kala made a face as if she disagreed. Gansey squared his shoulders and continued. So I think we deserve the truth. Tell me you know something, but you don't want to help me, if that's what's going on, but don't lie to me. It was a brave thing to say, or an arrogant one, or maybe there was not enough of a difference between the two things to matter. Every head in the room swung to Mora. She said, I know something, but I don't want to help you. For the second time that day, Kala looked delighted. Blue's mouth was open. She closed it. Gansey, however, just nodded, no more or less distressed than when Blue had retorted back to him at the restaurant. All right, then. No, you can stay put. We'll let ourselves out. And just like that, they did, Adam sending Blue a last look that she couldn't easily interpret. A second later, the Camaro revved high and the tires squealed out Gansey's true feelings. Then the house was quiet. It was a sucked-out silence, like the Raven boys had taken all the sound in the neighborhood with them. Blue whirled on her mother. Mom! She was going to say something else, but all that she could manage again was louder. Mom! Mora, Kala said. That was very rude, she added. I liked it. Then she added, I liked it. Mora turned to Blue as if Kala hadn't spoken. I don't want you to ever see him again. Indignant, Blue cried, whatever happened to children should never be given orders? That was before Gansey. Mora flipped around the death card, giving Blue a long time to stare at the skull inside the helmet. This is the same as me telling you not to walk in front of a bus. Several comebacks riffled through Blue's head before she found the one that she wanted. Why? Neve didn't see me on the corpse road. I'm not going to die in the next year. First of all, the corpse road is a promise, not a guarantee, Mora replied. Second of all, there are other terrible fates besides death. Shall we talk about dismemberment? Paralysis? Endless psychological trauma? There's something really wrong with those boys. When your mother says don't walk in front of a bus, she has a good reason. From the kitchen, Persephone's soft voice called, If someone had stopped you from walking in front of a bus, Mora, Blue wouldn't be here. Mora shot a frown in her direction, then swept her hand across the reading table as if she were clearing it of crumbs. The best case scenario here is that you make friends with a boy who's going to die. Ah, said Kala in a very, very knowing way. Now I see. Don't psychoanalyze me, her mother said. I already have, and again I say, ah. Mora sneered uncharacteristically, and then she asked Kala, what did you see when you touched that other boy, the Raven boy? They're all Raven boys, Blue said. Her mother shook her head. No, he's more Raven than the others. Kala rubbed her fingertips together as if she was wiping the memory of Ronan's tattoo from them. It's like scrying into that weird space. There's so much coming out of him, it shouldn't be possible. Do you remember that woman who came in who was pregnant with triplets? It was like that, but worse. He's pregnant? Blue asked. He's creating, Kyle said. That space is creating too. I don't know how to say it any better than that. Blue wondered what sort of creating they meant. She was always creating things, taking old things and cutting them up and making them better things, taking things that already existed and transforming them into something else. This, she felt, was what most people meant when they called someone creative. But she suspected that wasn't how Kala meant it. She suspected that what Kala meant was the true meaning of creative. To make a thing where before there was none. Mora caught Blue's expression. She said, I've never told you to do anything before, Blue, but I'm telling you now, stay away from them. I love it. It's so good. It's just fantastic. I've been stopping at last time I stopped at 20%. Right now we're at 39% of the way through. So I think that we can stop here and then we'll try and get to 60% next episode. Yeah. When your mom tells you not to walk in front of a fucking bus, you don't listen to her because that bus looks really enticing, okay? Look, don't you really want to know what the bus means to you? Deep down in your heart of hearts, don't you just really care about that? Learning what the bus means to you? Anyways. Okay. I really like... Things are ramping up. And we're not even halfway through. Things are... It's getting big. It's getting a big deal. Oh, one of my favorite things of, the fandom that surrounds this... book series is I really like that so many people are like, what was the Raven Cycle even about? I forgot the plot. All I know is the characters and what they're like. And I think that's really funny. I just care about their dynamics and what they're like. I totally forgot what the fuck the book was about. And isn't that just, yeah. When I read Percy Jackson, I feel like I could recite to anyone what the books were about. I could explain each thing from the first series of 5 to the Heroes of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, and I could recite most of the encounters that happen in Heroes of Olympus. Maybe not as effortlessly as I could do the first series, and probably more so out of more recency, I could explain what happens during the Trials of Apollo, and then some of the books in the in-between I could explain, and so far The Sun and the Star, and blah, blah, blah. I feel like I could explain the happenings in that book, in those books, that each thing that happens in each of them, I could give a summarized rundown of the order of events that occur. And I might get them mixed up or a little bit, but generally I know. And I am also equally enticed by how the characters are, what the characters are like, how funky they are, and how much I love them all, right? All of Rick Riordan's characters I adore with all my heart. But just something I never really thought about, was that, yeah, I feel like the Raven Cycle is such a good book series. It's got a great plot, but I think that if you give me 2 months after reading it, after rereading it, no matter how many times I read it, after rereading it, I feel like if you give me 2 months, I will not be able to tell you what happens. I'll be some people meet and they have a great time. Yep. And that's how that occurs. I love the Raven Cycle, and I hope that I've started to infect you. A buddy old pal friend of mine. I've forgotten to remind the white boy to finish the milk by Sunday. But that's okay, because I didn't buy milk this time, and we still have milk. The sibling person bought milk, so, and eventually I won't need the milk anymore. I just really wanted to have a little bit of milk on a regular basis so that I could have it for my cereal, but I'm nearly out of my cereal, so. Anyways, tomorrow's Monday. I don't know if I'm going to post this on Monday or I'm going to post this on Tuesday. I'm probably just going to paste the audio over some random drawing I do. Some little the last one I think I did a night sky with some birds. I just it really wasn't that tough. It took me like 5 minutes to draw. I'll just do another pretty thing like that or whatever. I wonder what I want to do the thumbnail as. Anyways. Kisses Pookie. You're asleep in your room right now. I know you are because you haven't responded to my text yet. That's unrelated to anything. They're just very boring texts about, can you help me figure out how to take my light bulb out of my ceiling fan? I don't know if it matters that I'm telling you what time it is that I'm recording this. It's 2 a.m. It's 1:59 a.m. actually, but you know. Anyways, I don't know why I'm still yapping. I think that someone just like gave me access to a microphone and said record something for me, and I was like, huh? You don't know what you just did. You don't know what you just did, actually. I'm too giggly right now. Okay. Calm the fart down, bro. Calm the fucking fart down. Okay. I don't remember how they do the outro on Creepcast. So I guess I'll just do like the one I'm pretty sure Wendigoon does at the end of his videos, which is like, he does like a thank you all so much for watching. See you in the next one. Maybe he says see you in the next. I don't know if he says see you in the next one. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye. He goes like bye. Big old bye. I'm gonna just do that a couple. Bye. 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 Bye.